Ryan Cole never imagined the night would end with a velvet box in his trembling hands, and the woman everyone called a Black Widow whispering, "I saved this for when you finally came." Standing at the edge of Victor Langston's glittering estate, the same man who destroyed his family and now threatened to take everything Ryan had left, he realized some invitations aren't requests. They're declarations of war. His 8-year-old daughter waited at home, trusting her father to protect their small, fragile world. The legal notice in his pocket said he had 30 days. The look in Isabella's desperate eyes said he had far less. If you want to see how a single father with nothing to lose takes down the most powerful man in town, stay with me until the end. And don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The wrought iron gate stood 15 feet high, crowned with gold-tipped spears that caught the late afternoon sun and threw it back like a warning. Ryan Cole sat in his 15-year-old pickup truck, engine ticking as it cooled, and stared at those gates the way a man stares at a gallows. Beyond them stretched a driveway of crushed white stone that curved through manicured gardens where a single rosebush probably cost more than his monthly mortgage. At the end of that pristine path sat the Langston estate, a sprawling monument to old money and older sins, its windows already glowing warm against the approaching dusk. Ryan's hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. The legal envelope sat on the passenger seat, its contents burning a hole through the cracked vinyl upholstery and straight into his gut. Final notice of lien. 30 days to settle outstanding municipal violations and unpaid assessments, or Cole Salvage and Auto will be seized and auctioned to satisfy debts. Debts that had appeared out of nowhere 6 months ago. Violations for hazards that didn't exist. Assessments based on property values inflated beyond reason. All of it stamped and signed and legal, wrapped in bureaucratic language that might as well have been Victor Langston's personal letterhead. The invitation had arrived 2 days after the lien notice. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, the kind of thing that belonged in a museum display about how the other half lived. Victor Langston requests the honor of your presence at a celebration of his granddaughter's 8th birthday. Ryan had almost burned it. Would have, if not for the handwritten note tucked inside, 3 words in elegant script that made his blood run cold. Please. We must. No signature. But he knew the handwriting. Isabella. His brother's widow. The woman who had disappeared behind these gates 3 years ago, right after Marcus died. The woman the town had whispered about in grocery store aisles and church parking lots, their voices dripping with scandal and speculation. She married into money fast enough, didn't she? Poor Marcus barely cold in the ground. Ryan had tried to shut those voices out, tried to remember the Isabella who'd made his brother smile, who'd brought homemade cookies to the salvage yard and laughed at Marcus's terrible jokes. But 3 years of silence had a way of drowning out good memories. A car horn blared behind him. Ryan glanced in the rearview mirror and saw a black Mercedes waiting, its driver's impatient scowl visible even through tinted windows. Ryan shifted into gear and rolled forward, the gates opening automatically as sensors detected his approach. No guards, no checkpoints, just smooth, efficient wealth doing what it did best, making everything look effortless while hiding the machinery underneath. The circular drive at the front of the estate was already crowded with vehicles that belonged in magazines. A silver Bentley, 2 Teslas, something low and Italian that Ryan couldn't name. His truck looked like a wounded animal limping into a veterinary office full of show dogs. He parked at the far edge, as if distance might make him less visible, and killed the engine. Through the windshield, he could see the party in full swing. White tents billowed in the gardens, their sides rolled up to reveal long tables draped in pink and gold. Children in clothes that cost more than Ryan's weekly grocery budget chased each other across the lawn while adults in cocktail attire clustered in groups, champagne flutes catching the light like tiny suns. A string quartet played somewhere he couldn't see, the music floating across the manicured grounds like something from another world entirely. Ryan checked his phone. A text from his neighbor, Mrs. Chen. "Lily's doing great. We're making cookies. Take your time." A photo showed his daughter, flower on her nose, grinning at the camera with that gap-toothed smile that could break his heart and put it back together in the same second. He typed back quickly. "Thanks. Be home soon. Love you, sweetheart." Then he added a heart emoji because Lily had taught him that words weren't always enough. The phone went into his pocket. The legal notice went into his jacket. And Ryan Cole, single father and salvage yard owner, climbed out of his truck and walked toward the kind of wealth that had always treated people like him as disposable. The contrast hit him immediately. Here, the grass was green enough to look painted. At his yard, weeds grew through cracked concrete. Here, the air smelled like jasmine and money. At his yard, it smelled like motor oil and rust. Here, children laughed without worry. His daughter asked questions about bills when she thought he wasn't listening. A server in a crisp white shirt materialized at his elbow, offering champagne from a silver tray. Ryan shook his head, and the server disappeared as smoothly as he'd appeared. Ryan kept walking, skirting the main gathering, staying in the shadows of the tent poles and hedgerows. He wasn't here to celebrate. He was here because Isabella had asked, and because the legal noose around his business was tightening by the hour. Ryan Cole. The voice came from behind him, smooth and aged like expensive whiskey. Ryan stopped walking but didn't turn immediately. He knew that voice. The whole town knew that voice. Mr. Langston. Ryan turned slowly, keeping his expression neutral, even as his heart hammered against his ribs. Victor Langston stood 5 feet away, a crystal tumbler of amber liquid in one hand. He was in his late 60s but carried it well, silver hair perfectly styled, tailored suit that probably cost more than Ryan's truck, posture that radiated the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. His eyes were the color of winter ice and just as warm. "I wasn't sure you'd accept the invitation," Victor said, "given the strained history between our families." Strained, as if Marcus's death was a minor disagreement instead of a tragedy that still woke Ryan up at 3 a.m, gasping for air. "I'm here for my niece," Ryan said evenly. "It's her birthday." "Of course." Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes, "though I'm surprised you remember her. 3 years is a long time for a child that age. Children adapt, you know, they forget." The implication hung in the air between them like smoke. "She doesn't need you, she's ours now." "I brought a gift," Ryan said, patting his jacket pocket where he'd tucked a small wrapped box. It wasn't much, a hand-carved wooden bird he'd made himself, something Marcus had taught him years ago when times were better. Nothing compared to the mountain of expensive presents probably waiting inside, but it was real. It was his. "How thoughtful." Victor took a sip of his drink. "I heard about your business troubles. Such a shame when these old establishments can't keep up with modern regulations. Environmental codes, safety standards, all so complicated these days." There it was, the blade sliding between his ribs, delivered with a sympathetic smile. "I'm working on it," Ryan said. "I'm sure you are." Victor's eyes gleamed. "Though I have to say, that property would be worth considerably more to someone with the right vision, prime location, water access. In the right hands, it could be quite valuable." Ryan's jaw tightened. "It's not for sale." "Everything's for sale, Mr. Cole. It's just a matter of finding the right price." Victor gestured toward the party with his glass. "Enjoy the celebration, and do say hello to Isabella if you get the chance. She speaks of your family so fondly." He walked away before Ryan could respond, melting into a group of men in suits who all looked like they'd been stamped from the same expensive mold. Ryan stood alone at the edge of the party, fury and helplessness warring in his chest. This was Victor's world. These were Victor's rules. And Ryan was just a piece on a board he didn't understand, being moved toward checkmate. "Uncle Ryan?" The voice was small and uncertain. Ryan turned and felt his breath catch. The little girl standing 3 feet away had Marcus's eyes, that same warm brown that could see straight through you. Her dark hair was pulled back with a pink ribbon, and she wore a dress that looked like it belonged on a doll in a shop window. But her expression was pure Marcus, curious, cautious, kind. "Sophie." Ryan dropped to one knee without thinking. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." "I'm 8 now," she said solemnly, as if this was a matter of great importance. "I know. That's practically grown up." A tiny smile flickered across her face. "Grandfather says I shouldn't talk to you." The words hit harder than they should have. Ryan kept his voice gentle. "Then maybe you should go back to your party." Sophie looked over her shoulder at the celebration, then back at Ryan. Do you have the same eyes as my daddy did? Grandfather won't let me see pictures. The world tilted sideways. Ryan reached into his wallet with shaking hands and pulled out the photo he kept there. Him and Marcus at the salvage yard, arms around each other's shoulders, both grinning like idiots. It was creased and worn from being held too many times. That's him, Ryan said softly. That's your dad. Sophie took the photo carefully, as if it might break. Her small fingers traced Marcus's face. He looks happy. He was, especially when he talked about you. Sophie. A sharp voice cut through the garden noise. A woman in a designer dress, one of Victor's associates, Ryan assumed, was bearing down on them with the determination of a guided missile. Come along, dear. Your grandfather is looking for you. Sophie's hand tightened on the photo. Can I keep this? Just for a little bit? Ryan's heart cracked clean through. You can keep it forever, sweetheart. It's yours. The woman arrived, placing a proprietary hand on Sophie's shoulder. Mr. Cole? I don't believe you're on the approved visitor list for the children's area. I was just leaving, Ryan said quietly. He stood up, forcing himself to smile at Sophie. Happy birthday. Sophie clutched the photo to her chest as the woman steered her away. She looked back once, and Ryan saw tears in those Marcus brown eyes. Then she was gone, swallowed back into the party. Ryan stood alone again, feeling like he'd been gutted. This was what Victor had taken. Not just property, not just money. Memories, connection. The simple right of a child to know where she came from. That was brave. The voice came from the shadows near the rose garden. Ryan turned sharply and saw her. Isabella Langston stood partially hidden by a trellis heavy with white blooms. She wore a simple black dress. Too simple for a party like this, Ryan noticed. No jewelry except a thin gold chain at her throat. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, and she looked thinner than he remembered. Tired. There were circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. I didn't think you'd come, she said quietly. I didn't think I had a choice. Ryan pulled the legal notice from his pocket. This was pretty convincing. Something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe, or shame. I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do. He monitors everything, every call, every email. This was the only way I could think of to get you here. Here for what, Isabella? To watch you play happy family with the man who destroyed mine? The words came out harsher than he intended, but he was too raw to soften them. Isabella flinched, but didn't look away. To help me stop him, she said, before he destroys everything else. I don't understand. Isabella glanced over her shoulder at the party, checking for observers. When she turned back, her hand came out of her pocket, holding a small velvet box. Marcus gave this to me 2 weeks before he died. He made me promise not to open it unless something happened to him. And he made me promise that if it did, I would give it to you when the time was right. Ryan stared at the box. It was dark blue velvet, worn at the edges. What is it? Insurance. Isabella pressed it into his hand, her fingers ice cold despite the warm evening. Everything I know about Victor's operations, everything Marcus found before... Her voice broke. Before they killed him. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Ryan's world narrowed to the box in his palm and the woman in front of him. Killed, he repeated. The police said it was an accident, brake failure. Convenient brake failure, on a car Marcus had just serviced himself, on a road he'd driven 1,000 times. Isabella's eyes were fierce now, burning with something Ryan recognized as rage barely contained. I couldn't prove it. I tried. But Victor owns the police chief, the mayor, half the town council. The investigation was closed before it began. Ryan's hands started to shake. You're saying Victor murdered my brother. I'm saying Marcus was about to expose illegal shipping operations running through the port. Millions of dollars in contraband moving through your family's salvage yard without your knowledge. Victor needed it stopped before federal investigators showed up. And Marcus... She swallowed hard. Marcus was too honest to be bought, and too stubborn to be scared. So they killed him. The words felt like broken glass in Ryan's throat. And then Victor offered me a choice. Isabella's voice was hollow now. Marry into the family, keep Sophie safe and cared for, or watch everything Marcus built get destroyed in court. He had documents, forged signatures, fake debts, evidence that would have made Marcus look like a criminal. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let Sophie grow up believing her father was... She stopped, pressing her palms against her eyes. Ryan wanted to be angry at her, wanted to rage about betrayal and weakness, but he saw it now, clear as day. The expensive dress that hung wrong on her frame, the way she positioned herself in shadows, away from the party, the exhaustion in her eyes that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. This wasn't a woman who'd married for money. This was a hostage dressed in designer clothes. Why now? Ryan asked. Why wait 3 years? Because 3 years ago, you had nothing he wanted. You were just Marcus's little brother with a failing business. Isabella met his eyes. But now he wants your land. The port expansion project needs your waterfront access. And Victor doesn't ask for things. He takes them. The legal notices, the violations, it's all part of his playbook. He did the same thing to 3 other property owners last year. They all sold within 6 months. I'm not selling. Then you'll lose it anyway. That's how he works. Legal pressure until you crack, and if you don't crack... She gestured helplessly. I've watched him destroy people, Ryan. Good people. He won't stop until he gets what he wants. Ryan opened the velvet box. Inside was a small key and a bank deposit slip, handwritten in Marcus's familiar scrawl. Safety deposit box 447, First National Bank. Password, Sophie's birthday. What's in the box? Everything Marcus gathered. Financial records, shipping manifests, photographs. Enough to prove what Victor's been doing for years. Isabella's voice dropped to barely a whisper. And enough to prove that Marcus's death wasn't an accident. Ryan's vision swam. The party sounds faded to white noise. He was holding 3 years of answers in a velvet box smaller than his palm. Why can't you get it yourself? Because Victor monitors every move I make. I can't go to the bank without him knowing. I can't make a phone call without it being recorded. I can't even talk to Sophie alone without supervision. Her laugh was bitter. He made me sign papers when we married, financial agreements, custody arrangements. If I try to leave, I lose everything, including her. That's not legal. You could what? Fight him in court with lawyers I can't afford against judges he plays golf with? Isabella shook her head. I tried, Ryan. I talked to 3 different attorneys. They all said the same thing. Victor Langston doesn't lose in this town. Ryan looked down at the key in his hand. Then he looked at the party. At Victor holding court near the champagne fountain, surrounded by people who laughed at his jokes and agreed with his opinions because disagreeing wasn't an option. He looked at the tent where Sophie was probably opening presents she didn't need, surrounded by children who'd never had to wonder if their father had been murdered. He threatened my daughter, Ryan said quietly, in the parking lot of her school. One of his people stopped me, said it would be a shame if the custody hearing went badly, said single fathers have a hard time when concerned citizens start calling child services. Isabella's intake of breath was sharp. He did the same thing to me. That's how he got me to agree to the marriage. Said he'd prove I was an unfit mother, that Sophie would be better off in foster care than with me. They stood in silence, 2 people trapped in different cages built by the same man. The string quartet finished one song and started another. Laughter drifted across the lawn. Somewhere nearby, a child shrieked with joy. I can't promise this will work, Ryan said finally. I'm not a lawyer or a cop or some kind of hero. I'm just a guy who fixes cars and tries to keep his kid fed. That's exactly why it might work. Isabella's eyes were bright with something that might have been hope. Because you're nobody to him. You're invisible. And the thing about powerful men is that they stop seeing the people they think don't matter. Ryan closed his fist around the velvet box. What do you need me to do? Get the contents of that deposit box. Make copies, multiple copies stored in different places. Then we wait for the right moment. Isabella pulled a business card from her pocket and pressed it into his free hand. This is my lawyer, the one honest attorney in town who's been helping me document everything. His name is James Chen. He'll know what to do with the evidence. Ryan looked at the card. James Chen, attorney at law. The address was downtown, above a dry cleaner, not the kind of office Victor's lawyers would work from. When we move, we have to move fast, Isabella continued. Victor has contingency plans for everything. The moment he thinks we're a threat, he'll activate them. Legal maneuvers, character assassination, worse. We get one shot at this. And if it doesn't work? Isabella's smile was sad. Then we both lose everything we have left. But at least we'll have tried. Ryan thought about Lily waiting at home, covered in cookie dough and innocence. Thought about Sophie clutching that photograph like a lifeline. Thought about Marcus, who tried to do the right thing and died for it. I need to get back to my daughter, he said. She's waiting for me. Of course. Isabella started to turn away, then stopped. Ryan, thank you for not giving up on us. I haven't done anything yet. You came. That's more than anyone else has done in 3 years. She disappeared back into the party, moving with the practiced ease of someone who'd learned to be invisible in plain sight. Ryan watched her go, then looked down at the velvet box in his hand one more time. Behind him, Victor's laugh rang out across the garden, loud, confident, the sound of a man who'd never lost and never expected to. Ryan had spent 3 years believing his brother had abandoned them, had made reckless choices that led to his death. 3 years of anger and grief and guilt that maybe if he'd paid more attention, been a better brother, things would have been different. But Marcus hadn't abandoned anyone. He'd fought. And he'd left behind the weapons to finish the war he'd started. Ryan walked back toward his truck, the party sounds fading behind him. His phone buzzed with another text from Mrs. Chen. Lily says to tell you the cookies are chocolate chip and you're not allowed to eat them all. He smiled, despite everything, and typed back, tell her I'll try to save her at least 2. At his truck, Ryan paused and looked back at the estate one more time. Lights blazed from every window. Music floated on the evening breeze. It looked like a fairy tale, like something from a storybook where everyone lived happily ever after. But fairy tales didn't have safety deposit boxes full of evidence. They didn't have murdered brothers or threatened daughters or desperate widows making last stands in rose gardens. This wasn't a fairy tale. This was war. And Ryan Cole, single father and salvage yard owner, was about to learn exactly what he was capable of when he had nothing left to lose. He climbed into his truck and headed home, the velvet box secured in his jacket pocket, right next to his heart. Tomorrow he'd go to the bank. Tomorrow he'd start fighting back. But tonight, he had cookies to eat and a daughter to hold. Because that's what Marcus would have done. That's what good fathers did. They protected their families, no matter the cost. The gates opened automatically as he approached, letting him out into the ordinary world where people struggled and survived and sometimes lost everything to men who thought power made them untouchable. But Victor Langston had made a mistake. He'd pushed too hard, threatened the wrong daughter, underestimated the wrong broken-down salvage yard owner. And in 3 days, when Ryan Cole walked into First National Bank with a key and a birthday for a password, that mistake would start becoming very, very expensive. The truck's headlights cut through the gathering darkness as Ryan drove toward home, toward Lily, toward whatever came next. His hands were steady on the wheel now. The fear was still there, coiled tight in his chest, but underneath it was something harder, colder. Purpose. His brother had died trying to stop a monster. Isabella was trapped trying to survive one. Sophie was growing up in a gilded cage, her father's memory stolen along with her freedom. But Ryan was outside the cage. Ryan could move. Ryan could fight, and he would. For Marcus, for Sophie, for Lily and the future she deserved, one where men like Victor Langston didn't get to win just because they'd always won before. The salvage yard came into view, his small house beside it lit up like a beacon. Through the kitchen window he could see Lily and Mrs. Chen laughing, flour everywhere, chaos and joy mixed in equal measure. That's what he was fighting for. Not revenge, not justice, though that would be nice. Simple, ordinary happiness. The kind that didn't require velvet boxes or secret deposits or playing games with men who treated human lives like chess pieces. Ryan parked the truck and sat for a moment, letting the enormity of what he'd agreed to settle over him. Then he got out, locked the door, and walked toward the light. Tomorrow would come soon enough. Tonight, he had cookies to eat and a daughter who needed him to be her father, not a warrior. But the velvet box stayed in his jacket. The key stayed close to his heart. And somewhere across town, in an estate surrounded by gates and guards and the illusion of safety, Victor Langston had no idea that the ground beneath his empire had just started to shift. The game was on, and this time the Invisible Man was going to win. The cookies were burned on the bottom, but Lily didn't care. She ate 3 of them sitting cross-legged on the kitchen counter, chocolate smeared across her cheek, talking a mile a minute about the science project she wanted to do for school. Something about volcanoes and baking soda. Ryan listened and nodded and tried to focus on her words instead of the weight of the velvet box pressing against his ribs. Mrs. Chen had left an hour ago with a knowing look and a container of the salvageable cookies. The kitchen was a disaster zone of flour and mixing bowls, but Lily's laugh had filled every corner of the small house, and that was worth any amount of cleanup. "Dad, you're not listening." Lily's voice pulled him back. She was watching him with those sharp eyes that saw too much for 8 years old. "I am listening. Volcanoes, baking soda, very explosive." "You're thinking about grown-up stuff again." She picked at the edge of her cookie. "Is it about the yard?" Ryan's chest tightened. He'd tried so hard to keep the business troubles away from her, to let her stay a kid for as long as possible. But children weren't stupid. They heard things. They felt the tension even when you thought you were hiding it. "Yeah, sweetheart, just some boring paperwork stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." Mrs. Chen says worrying is what parents do so kids don't have to. Lily swung her legs against the cabinet. "But I'm not a baby anymore. I'm almost 9. Not for 4 more months. That's basically 9. She reached over and touched his hand, her fingers sticky with chocolate. "Are we going to lose the house?" The question hit him like a punch. Ryan set down the cookie he'd been pretending to eat and pulled Lily into his lap, even though she was getting too big for this, even though she squirmed and protested that she wasn't a little kid. "No," he said firmly. "We're not going to lose the house, I promise." "You can't promise that. You don't know what's going to happen." She was right, and the fact that she knew it made Ryan want to punch holes in the wall. Instead, he held her tighter. "Then I promise I will do everything I can to make sure we don't lose it. That I can promise, okay?" Lily was quiet for a moment, then nodded against his shoulder. "Okay." They sat like that until the kitchen clock chimed 9, and Ryan realized she should have been in bed an hour ago. He carried her upstairs despite her protests, tucked her in despite her insistence that she was too old for tucking in, and kissed her forehead despite her dramatic sighs about how embarrassing dads were. "Love you, monster," he said at the door. "Love you too, Dad." She was already half asleep, one arm thrown over her stuffed rabbit that had been with her since she was 2. "Hey, Dad?" "Yeah?" "Whatever the grown-up stuff is, you're going to figure it out. You always do." Ryan's throat closed up. He managed a nod and pulled the door halfway shut, leaving it cracked the way she liked it, the hallway light spilling across her floor. Downstairs, the house felt too quiet. Ryan cleaned the kitchen on autopilot, his mind running through everything Isabella had told him, every word, every implication. The velvet box sat on the counter now, and he found himself staring at it between putting away mixing bowls and wiping down counters. Marcus's handwriting on the deposit slip. His brother's last insurance policy, saved for 3 years in a bank vault, while Ryan had spent that time angry at a dead man who'd actually been trying to save them all. Ryan picked up his phone and dialed before he could talk himself out of it. The number was one he hadn't called in 6 months, not since the last uncomfortable conversation about loans and extensions and promises he couldn't quite keep. It rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. "This better be important, Cole. It's almost 10. "Oh, hey. Jimmy, sorry about the time. I need a favor." Jimmy Reeves had worked at First National Bank for 30 years, starting as a teller and working his way up to assistant manager through sheer stubborn competence. He was also one of the few people in town who'd known Marcus well enough to come to the funeral without being asked. "Favors at 10 o'clock on a Thursday usually mean trouble," Jimmy said, but his tone had softened. "What's going on?" "I need to access a safety deposit box tomorrow, number 447. It's under Marcus's name." A pause. Ryan could hear a television in the background, the murmur of Jimmy's wife asking who was calling. "Ryan, you know I can't just let you into your brother's box. There are procedures, estate laws." "I have the key and the password." Another pause, longer this time. Where'd you get those? Does it matter? Might matter to the people who authorized that box in the first place. Jimmy's voice had gone careful. And it might matter to me if I'm going to risk my job helping you. Ryan looked at the velvet box again, at Marcus's handwriting, at the key that represented 3 years of unanswered questions. Isabella gave them to me, he said quietly. Tonight, at Victor Langston's party. The silence on the other end stretched so long Ryan thought the call had dropped. Then Jimmy exhaled slowly. Jesus, Ryan, you're playing with fire. I'm playing with evidence. There's a difference. Not to Victor Langston, there isn't. Jimmy's voice dropped. Listen to me. That man owns half this town and has dirt on the other half. You start poking around in his business, you're going to get burned. He's already burning me. The lien notice on my property, the violations that appeared out of nowhere, that's all Victor. He wants my land for his port expansion. I know. The admission was heavy. I've seen him do it before. It's always the same playbook. Then help me stop him. Jimmy laughed, but there was no humor in it. How? I'm a bank manager, not Batman. What exactly do you think is in that deposit box? Proof. Of everything Marcus found before he died. Everything Victor's been doing. And what are you going to do with this proof? Take it to the police chief who plays poker with Victor every Wednesday? The mayor who owes Victor for his campaign funding? The district attorney who... I don't know yet, Ryan interrupted. But doing nothing isn't an option anymore. He threatened Lily. The words hung in the air. Ryan heard Jimmy's sharp intake of breath. He what? Not directly, one of his people. In the school parking lot. Said it would be a shame if custody hearings went badly for single dads. Ryan's hand tightened on the phone. So yeah, I'm playing with fire, but I'm already burning, Jimmy. Might as well make it count. Another long silence. Then Jimmy sighed, the sound of a man making a decision he'd probably regret. First thing tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. before the main branch opens. Bring the key and ID. And Ryan, make copies of whatever's in there. Multiple copies. Hide them in different places. Because if Victor finds out what you're doing, I know. I don't think you do, but I guess you're about to learn. The call ended. Ryan set the phone down and stared at his reflection in the dark kitchen window. He looked tired. Older than 32 had any right to look. But underneath the exhaustion, he saw something else. The same stubborn determination that had kept the salvage yard running through lean years and leaner months. The same refusal to quit that Marcus had always teased him about. His phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. Ryan's pulse spiked until he opened it and saw the message. This is Isabella. Borrowed phone. Be careful tomorrow. He's watching. Ryan typed back quickly. Who's watching? Victor? The response came immediately. Everyone. Trust no one except James Chen. Delete this thread. Ryan stared at the messages, then did as she asked. The texts disappeared, leaving no trace they'd ever existed. He wondered how many conversations Isabella had to erase every day, how many precautions she took just to survive in that house. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Ryan lay in bed listening to the house settle, to Lily's soft breathing from down the hall, to the distant sound of trucks on the highway that ran past the salvage yard. His mind kept circling back to Marcus, to all the conversations they'd never had, all the things Ryan had assumed instead of asking. He'd thought his brother was distant those last few months, distracted. Ryan had chalked it up to new father stress, to the pressures of running the port operations. But Marcus had been investigating, gathering evidence, building a case against a man powerful enough to make people disappear. And he died for it. Convenient brake failure on a road he'd driven 1,000 times. Ryan turned over, punched his pillow, tried to force his brain to shut down. Tomorrow was going to be difficult enough without facing it exhausted. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sophie's face when she'd looked at Marcus's photo. The wonder and grief mixed together, the hunger for a father she'd never really known. That could be Lily someday, if Ryan wasn't careful. If Victor decided he was too much trouble. If the brakes failed on his truck just like they'd failed on Marcus's car. The thought sent ice through his veins. Ryan sat up, suddenly wide awake. He grabbed his phone and pulled up his banking app, then his insurance policies, his property deeds, everything important. He forwarded it all to an email address he created on the spot, something random Victor would never connect to him. Then he wrote a long email to Mrs. Chen with instructions for Lily's care if something happened to him. Guardianship requests, bank account access, everything. His hands shook as he typed. This was paranoia, probably. Victor wouldn't actually kill him. That would be too obvious, too risky. Except Marcus had thought the same thing. And Marcus was dead. Ryan hit send on the email, set up the auto-forward on his bank accounts, and added Mrs. Chen as a beneficiary on his life insurance. It took until 3 a.m. to finish, by which point he felt both more secure and more terrified than when he'd started. At 6 a.m., his alarm went off. Ryan silenced it quickly, not wanting to wake Lily. He showered, dressed in his least worn jeans and a button-down shirt that only had one small oil stain near the hem. If he was going to the bank, he should at least look like he belonged there. Lily was still asleep when he left. Ryan wrote a note and left it on the kitchen counter. Gone to handle some business. Mrs. Chen will get you to school. Love you. Don't eat all the cookies. Dad. The drive to town took 20 minutes. Ryan spent them rehearsing what he'd say if anyone asked questions. Just accessing my brother's deposit box. Have the key and password. Nothing unusual. Just a routine family matter. First National Bank sat on Main Street, a stolid brick building that had been there since the 1950s. Ryan parked in the back lot at 7:45 and waited, watching the employees arrive one by one. Jimmy's silver Honda pulled in at 7:58. Ryan got out and met him at the employee entrance. Jimmy looked like he'd slept about as well as Ryan had, which was to say, not at all. "You're sure about this?" Jimmy asked, holding the door open. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." They walked through the quiet bank, their footsteps echoing on marble floors. The vault was in the basement, behind 3 locked doors that Jimmy opened with practiced efficiency. Inside, metal boxes lined the walls in neat rows, each one hiding secrets that ranged from mundane to catastrophic. "Box 447, Jimmy said, running his finger along the numbers. "Here." It was smaller than Ryan expected, just a standard-sized deposit box, the kind that could hold important papers and not much else. Ryan pulled the key from his pocket with hands that had suddenly gone clumsy. "Password?" Jimmy asked. "Sophie's birthday, October 15, 2016. Jimmy typed it into the access panel. Something clicked. The lock released. "I'll give you privacy," Jimmy said. "You've got 30 minutes before the main branch opens. After that, I can't guarantee nobody will notice you're here." "Thank you, really." Jimmy paused at the vault door. Marcus was a good man. If he thought this was important enough to hide, he shook his head. "Just be careful, Ryan, please." Then he was gone, and Ryan was alone with his brother's last secret. The box slid out smoothly. Ryan carried it to the small table in the center of the vault and sat down. His heart hammered so hard he could feel it in his throat. Inside the box was a large manila envelope, the kind used for legal documents. Marcus's handwriting on the front. "For Ryan, when the time is right." Ryan's vision blurred. He blinked hard and opened the envelope. Paper slid out onto the table, dozens of them, shipping manifests with dates and cargo descriptions, photographs of containers being loaded at odd hours, financial ledgers showing money moving through accounts that didn't match legitimate business operations, email printouts between people Ryan didn't recognize, discussing shipments and payments and timing, and underneath it all, a letter, handwritten on yellow legal paper in Marcus's familiar scrawl. "Ryan, if you're reading this, it means something happened to me. I'm sorry. I know how that sounds, but I am. Sorry for the secrets, sorry for the danger, sorry for leaving you to clean up this mess. But someone has to know the truth, and you're the only person I can trust with it. Victor Langston has been running illegal operations through the port for at least 5 years, maybe longer. Contraband shipments disguised as legitimate cargo. I've documented 23 separate incidents in the past 6 months alone. Electronics, pharmaceuticals, things I can't even identify. Millions of dollars moving through our town while the authorities look the other way. I tried to go to the police. Chief Morrison told me I was mistaken. I tried the FBI field office in Portland. They said they'd investigate, but I never heard back. I tried going to the press. The editor of the Tribune killed the story before it ran. That's when I realized how deep this goes. Victor doesn't just have influence, he has control. And anyone who threatens that control becomes a problem to be solved. I'm probably a problem now. I've been followed for the past 2 weeks. My car was broken into, but nothing was stolen. Phone calls at odd hours with nobody on the other end. Classic intimidation tactics. But I can't stop. Because if I just walk away and pretend I didn't see anything, then Victor wins, and men like that should never win. I've made arrangements for Isabella and Sophie. There's money in an account Victor doesn't know about. Enough to start over somewhere safe. I've prepared documents for Isabella to take to James Chen. He's the only lawyer in town Victor doesn't own. If something happens to me, Chen will know what to do. But I need you to do something too, little brother. I need you to be careful. Don't trust anyone in authority. Don't trust anyone who works for Victor or does business with him. Keep your head down and protect what's yours. And when the time comes, when you're ready and it's safe, finish what I started. Take this evidence and burn Victor's empire to the ground. I'm sorry I couldn't do it myself. I'm sorry for a lot of things. But I'm not sorry I tried. And I hope someday you'll understand why I had to. Take care of yourself. Take care of your girl. And if you ever see Sophie, tell her daddy loved her more than anything in the world. Marcus Ryan's hand shook so badly, the paper rattled. He read the letter 3 times, each pass making the truth harder to deny. His brother hadn't been reckless or careless. He'd been brave. Deliberately, consciously brave, knowing exactly what the cost might be, and he'd paid it. Ryan wiped his eyes roughly and started organizing the documents. Financial records in one pile, shipping manifests in another, photographs in a third, email printouts in a fourth. Every piece of evidence carefully labeled and dated in Marcus's meticulous handwriting. 23 incidents, 5 years of operations, millions of dollars, and one dead man who'd tried to stop it. Ryan pulled out his phone and started photographing everything. Every page, every image, every scrap of proof. He uploaded them to the cloud storage account he'd created that morning, then downloaded a backup to his phone's encrypted storage. When that was done, he photographed everything again from different angles, just to be sure. 30 minutes turned into 45. Ryan barely noticed. He was too focused on documenting everything, on making sure Marcus's work wouldn't be lost if something happened to the originals. A knock on the vault door made him jump. Jimmy's voice came through. "Ryan, we've got customers arriving. You need to wrap this up." 2 more minutes. Ryan gathered everything back into the envelope, then hesitated. Isabella had said to make copies. Store them in different places. Never keep all the evidence together. He split the documents into 3 sets. One went back into the deposit box. Insurance, in case everything else was lost. One went into his jacket pocket, pressed against his chest. The third he'd drop with James Chen before noon. The letter he kept separate. That was personal. That was his. Ryan locked the deposit box and carried it back to its slot. His hands were steadier now. The shock had worn off, replaced by something colder and more useful. Clarity. Marcus had gathered the evidence. Isabella had preserved it. Now it was Ryan's turn to use it. He emerged from the vault to find Jimmy hovering anxiously near the employee break room. The bank's main floor was starting to fill with customers. A teller Ryan didn't recognize glanced their way curiously. "All set?" Jimmy asked quietly. "Yeah, thanks for this." "Don't thank me yet. Just stay safe, okay? And if things go sideways, you never got that key from me." "Understood." Ryan walked out through the front entrance like any normal customer. The morning sun was bright after the vault's fluorescent lights. He blinked against it and headed for his truck, every instinct screaming at him to look over his shoulder to check if he was being followed. But that would look suspicious. So Ryan walked normally, climbed into his truck normally, and pulled out of the parking lot like a man who'd just handled routine banking and nothing more. He made it 3 blocks before he noticed the black SUV in his rear-view mirror. Ryan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The black SUV maintained a steady distance, 3 car lengths back, matching his speed exactly. Tinted windows made it impossible to see who was driving. The license plate was obscured by what looked like dried mud, too convenient to be accidental. His first instinct was to floor it, to lose them in the side streets he knew better than anyone. But that would confirm he'd noticed the tail, confirm he had something to hide. Instead, Ryan forced himself to drive normally, taking the route he always took back to the salvage yard, left on Maple, right on Industrial, straight past the old cannery that had been shut down for a decade. The SUV followed every turn. Ryan's mind raced. Isabella had warned him Victor would be watching. But this fast? Had someone at the bank called ahead? Was Jimmy in Victor's pocket after all? Or had they been watching the bank itself, waiting to see if anyone accessed Marcus's box? At a red light, Ryan pulled out his phone and texted Mrs. Chen with hands that had started to shake again. Just a simple message that wouldn't alarm anyone monitoring his communications. Running late. Can you keep Lily until noon? We'll explain later. The response came immediately. Of course. She's already asking if she can skip school and help you at the yard today. Ryan smiled despite the fear crawling up his spine. That sounded like Lily. He typed back, "Tell her nice try, but education is important. Love you both." The light turned green. Ryan drove forward. The SUV followed. 2 blocks from the salvage yard, Ryan made a decision. Instead of turning into his property, he kept driving straight, heading toward downtown. If they wanted to follow him, fine. But he wasn't leading them to his home, to Lily's school, to anywhere that mattered. The SUV stayed with him. James Chen's office was above a dry cleaner on 4th Street, exactly like Isabella had said. Ryan circled the block twice, watching for other vehicles, other watchers. The SUV maintained its distance but didn't try to hide anymore. Whoever was driving wanted him to know he was being followed. Ryan parked in front of the dry cleaner. The SUV pulled into a spot across the street and idled there, engine running. Ryan sat for a moment, Marcus's documents pressed against his chest, and tried to decide if walking into Chen's office was brave or stupid. Probably both. He got out of the truck and walked toward the entrance without looking at the SUV. The stairway was narrow and smelled like cleaning chemicals. Chen's office was on the 2nd floor, marked by a frosted glass door with peeling gold letters. Ryan knocked. No answer. He tried the handle and found it unlocked. The office was small and cluttered, every surface covered with case files and legal books. A desk dominated the space, buried under papers that looked like they'd been organized using a system only their owner understood. Behind the desk sat a man in his 50s, Korean features weathered by years of what Ryan guessed were losing battles against people with better lawyers and bigger budgets. James Chen looked up from the document he was reading and studied Ryan over wire-rimmed glasses. His expression was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. "Ryan Cole," Chen said. It wasn't a question. "How did you—" "Isabella called this morning, said you might be coming." Chen set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. "Also, you look exactly like your brother. Same eyes, same stubborn set to the jaw." Ryan's throat tightened. "You knew Marcus?" "He came to see me about 6 weeks before he died. Wanted to know how to protect his family if something happened to him. I helped him set up trusts, power of attorney documents, contingency plans." Chen's expression darkened. "A lot of good it did. Victor's lawyers tore through those protections like tissue paper." "Isabella said you were helping her." "Trying to help her. There's a difference." Chen gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit. And tell me you didn't just walk in here with Victor's people watching the building." Ryan sat heavily. "The black SUV? They've been parked across the street since 7 this morning. Probably expected Isabella to make a move. Didn't expect you." Chen pulled out a notepad. "So what did you find in the deposit box?" Ryan hesitated. "Trust no one," Marcus's letter had said. But Marcus had also trusted James Chen enough to send Isabella to him. And right now, Chen was the only lawyer in town Victor didn't own. Ryan pulled the envelope from his jacket and slid it across the desk. Everything Marcus gathered, 5 years of illegal shipping operations, financial records, witness statements, photos, all of it. Chen opened the envelope carefully, like it might explode. His expression didn't change as he started reading, but Ryan saw his hands tighten on the papers. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the rustle of documents and the distant hum of the dry cleaner's machines below. Finally, Chen looked up. His face had gone pale. "Do you understand what you have here? Proof that Victor Langston has been running contraband through the port. Proof that he killed my brother to keep it quiet. Proof that could destroy half the power structure in this town. Chen spread the documents across his desk. These shipping manifests implicate the harbor master, the customs inspector, and 3 members of the town council. These financial records show payoffs to the police chief and the district attorney. This is beyond just Victor. This is a network. Ryan's stomach dropped. How many people are involved? At least a dozen in positions of authority. Probably twice that many if you count the people who just look the other way. Chen pulled off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Your brother stumbled onto something much bigger than one corrupt businessman. He found a machine that's been running this town for years. Then we expose it. We take this to the FBI, the state police, someone who isn't on Victor's payroll. Chen laughed, but it was a hollow sound. You think Marcus didn't try that? Look at this. He pulled out one of the documents and pointed to a handwritten note in the margin. Marcus contacted the FBI field office in Portland 3 times. Never got a call back. Either they didn't believe him, or someone got to them first. Welcome to how power works in small towns. Chen started organizing the documents into piles. Here's what's going to happen. Victor already knows you accessed that deposit box. The question is whether he knows what was in it. If he does, he'll move fast to discredit you before you can use this information. Character assassination, legal threats, maybe worse. If he doesn't know yet, we have a small window to act. How small? Hours, maybe. Days, if we're lucky. Chen pulled a scanner from under his desk and started feeding documents through it. I'm making copies. You need to do the same. Store them everywhere. Cloud storage, USB drives, mail copies to people you trust in other states. The more dispersed this information is, the harder it becomes to suppress. Ryan watched the scanner's light sweep across Marcus's careful documentation. What about Isabella? She's still in that house with him. Isabella knows the risks. We've been planning for this moment for 2 years. Chen didn't look up from the scanner. She has a go bag hidden in the garden shed. Cash, IDs, everything she needs to disappear with Sophie if things go sideways. The moment I give her the signal, she runs. That's the plan? She just runs? That's survival. You can't fight Victor Langston from inside his house. The scanner beeped as it finished another page. But from outside, with this evidence, we have a chance. Not a guarantee. A chance. Ryan pulled out his phone and showed Chen the photos he'd taken at the bank. I already uploaded everything to cloud storage. Different accounts, different providers. Even if they get my phone, they can't get all of them. Chen's eyebrows rose. Smart. Marcus said you were sharper than you looked. He said that? Among other things. He was proud of you, worried about dragging you into this mess, but proud. Chen finished scanning and handed the originals back to Ryan. Keep these somewhere safe. Not your house, not your truck, not anywhere Victor would think to look. You have a safety deposit box of your own? I barely have a savings account. Then get one. Different bank, different town. Put half these documents there. Give me the other half. That way, if one of us goes down, the other still has ammunition. The casual way Chen said goes down made Ryan's blood run cold. This wasn't a legal case to the lawyer. This was war, and casualties were expected. There's something else, Ryan said. He pulled out Marcus's letter and slid it across the desk. He wrote this before he died. Says he sabotaged his own car to destroy evidence before they could take it. Chen read the letter twice, his expression growing darker with each pass. When he finished, he set it down carefully, like it was made of glass. That changes everything. How? Because it means Marcus knew they were coming for him. He had time to prepare, which means he probably left more than just this deposit box. Chen stood and walked to his filing cabinet, pulling out a thick folder labeled Langston. Marcus came to see me 3 times. The last visit was 2 days before he died. He said he had insurance, that if anything happened to him, the truth would come out anyway. The deposit box was the insurance. Maybe, or maybe it was just part of it. Chen flipped through the folder. Marcus was methodical. He wouldn't put all his evidence in one place. If he told me he had insurance, he meant multiple fail-safes. Ryan's mind raced. Isabella gave me the deposit box. If there's more, she would have told me. Unless she doesn't know about it. Unless Marcus kept some things separate, even from her, to protect her. Chen pulled out a document and studied it. Look at this. The trust Marcus set up for Sophie. The primary trustee is Isabella, but there's a secondary trustee listed. Someone named David Park. Any idea who that is? Ryan shook his head. Never heard of him. Neither have I, but Marcus wouldn't list someone as trustee without a reason. Chen grabbed his phone and started typing. David Park. Let's see what we can find. While Chen searched, Ryan walked to the window and looked down at the street. The black SUV was still there, idling at the curb. As Ryan watched, a second SUV pulled up behind it, then a third. Chen, we have a problem. The lawyer joined him at the window. His face went tight. They're boxing us in. Can we get out the back? Fire escape to the alley, but they'll have that covered too if they're smart. Chen grabbed his jacket and started shoving documents into a battered leather briefcase. Time to go, now. What about everything's already uploaded? The physical documents are just backup. Chen pulled a USB drive from his desk drawer and tossed it to Ryan. Full copies. Hide it somewhere they'll never think to look. Your daughter's school locker, the wheel well of a stranger's car, bury it in the park. I don't care. Just make sure it survives if we don't. They headed for the back door. Chen moved with the efficiency of someone who'd made emergency exits before. The fire escape was rusted but stable. They climbed down quickly, shoes clanging on metal rungs. The alley behind the building was empty. No SUVs, no watchers. Chen pointed left. My car's 2 blocks that way. Blue Honda. If we get separated, meet me at... A man stepped out from behind a dumpster, blocking their path. He was built like a linebacker, wearing an expensive suit that didn't quite hide the bulk underneath. Another man appeared at the opposite end of the alley, then 2 more behind them, cutting off the fire escape. They were surrounded. The first man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Cole, Mr. Chen, Mr. Langston would like a word. Chen stepped slightly in front of Ryan. Tell Mr. Langston we're busy. We'll schedule an appointment. This isn't a request. Then it's kidnapping, which is a felony. You sure you want to do this in broad daylight? The man's smile widened. Who's going to stop us? The police? We are the police. He pulled out a badge. Detective Frank Morrison, it read. Same last name as the police chief Marcus had mentioned in his letter. Family business, apparently. Corruption ran in the blood. We haven't committed any crime, Ryan said, trying to keep his voice steady. Trespassing on private property, theft of confidential documents, conspiracy to commit fraud. Morrison listed them off like he was reading a grocery list. Should I keep going? Because I can keep going. We've got quite a file on you, Mr. Cole. Those are all lies. Prove it. In court. With lawyers you can't afford. While your daughter stays with social services pending the outcome of your custody hearing. Morrison's eyes were dead, empty of anything resembling human decency. Or you can come have a conversation with Mr. Langston. Your choice. Ryan's hand moved toward his pocket, toward his phone. Morrison's hand moved faster, closing around Ryan's wrist with crushing force. I'll take that, Morrison said, pulling the phone free. He tossed it to one of the other men, who dropped it on the concrete and stomped it into pieces. Then he did the same to Chen's phone. Chen's voice was ice. You're making a mistake. The only mistake here is you two thinking you could take on Victor Langston and win. Morrison pulled out a set of zip ties. Hands behind your back, both of you. Let's make this easy. Ryan's mind raced through options. Fight, run, scream for help. But there were 4 of them and 2 of him and Chen. The alley was empty. Nobody was coming to help. The USB drive in his pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. If they found it, if they took it, then all of this was for nothing. Ryan made eye contact with Chen and saw the same calculation happening behind the lawyer's glasses. They were outmatched, outgunned, out of options. But Marcus hadn't given up. Marcus had fought until the end. Ryan took a breath and made his decision. Okay, I'll come with you. Just leave Chen out of this. He's just a lawyer doing his job. Noble, Morrison said. Stupid, but noble. Unfortunately, Mr. Langston wants both of you. So hands behind your back, or I'll make this much less pleasant. Chen gave Ryan a tiny shake of his head, a warning not to do anything rash. Then the lawyer put his hands behind his back and allowed himself to be zip-tied. Ryan did the same, feeling the plastic bite into his wrists. Morrison patted them both down efficiently. He found Chen's briefcase and passed it to another officer, found Ryan's wallet and pocketed it. His hand brushed the pocket where the USB drive was hidden, and Ryan's heart stopped. But Morrison moved on, apparently satisfied. The drive was small enough, flat enough, that it felt like just a thick seam in the denim. Ryan breathed again. They were marched to a black SUV and pushed into the back seat. No sirens, no lights, no indication this was official police business. Just 4 men in suits treating them like cargo. The SUV pulled out of the alley and into traffic. Morrison drove. Another man sat in the passenger seat. Ryan and Chen were in back with the remaining 2 officers boxing them in. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the engine and the occasional crackle of police radio from the front seat. Ryan tried to memorize the route, tried to keep track of turns and landmarks, but his mind kept circling back to one terrible thought. What happens to Lily if I don't come back? They drove for 20 minutes, leaving downtown behind and heading toward the waterfront. The port sprawled along the harbor, massive cranes standing like metal giants against the sky. Shipping containers were stacked in neat rows, each one a mystery box of cargo. Nobody questioned too carefully. The SUV pulled through a security gate that opened automatically. No guards, no checkpoint, just smooth access like they owned the place, which, Ryan supposed, they did. They parked in front of a warehouse that looked abandoned from the outside. Broken windows, rusted siding, weeds growing through cracked pavement. But when Morrison opened the door and pushed them inside, Ryan saw the truth. The warehouse was pristine inside, divided into offices and storage areas that hummed with expensive climate control. This was the nerve center, the place where Victor ran his operation away from prying eyes. Morrison led them through a maze of corridors to a conference room that could have belonged in any legitimate business. Long table, leather chairs, panoramic windows overlooking the harbor. And standing at the window, hands behind his back like a general surveying his troops, was Victor Langston. He turned as they entered. His expression was mild, almost pleasant, like they were guests, not prisoners. Mr. Cole, Mr. Chen, thank you for coming. Victor gestured to the chairs around the table. Please, sit. We have much to discuss. Morrison cut the zip ties but kept a hand on Ryan's shoulder, a clear message not to try anything stupid. Ryan and Chen sat. Victor remained standing, a power play that put him above them literally and figuratively. I'm disappointed, Victor said conversationally. I thought we had an understanding, Mr. Cole. You stay in your lane, I stay in mine. No conflict, no problems. You threatened my daughter, Ryan said. You killed my brother. That's not no problems. Your brother made poor choices. I gave him opportunities to walk away. He refused. Victor's voice remained calm, like they were discussing the weather. And your daughter was never in danger. That was simply encouragement for you to see reason. Reason? Is that what you call stealing my property? I'm not stealing anything. I'm offering to purchase it at fair market value. The fact that you're facing financial difficulties is unfortunate, but not my responsibility. Chen leaned forward. Financial difficulties you manufactured through fraudulent liens and fabricated violations. Victor's smile was thin. Careful, counselor. Accusations of fraud require proof. Do you have proof? We have plenty of proof, Ryan said. 5 years of it. Shipping manifests, financial records, witness statements, everything Marcus gathered before you killed him. For the first time, something flickered across Victor's face. Surprise, maybe. Or concern. So that's what was in the deposit box, Victor said quietly. Marcus's little insurance policy. I wondered what had happened to that. You knew about it? I knew Marcus was too smart to go down without leaving a trail. I've been waiting 3 years for someone to follow it. Victor walked to the table and leaned on it, his weight on his palms, bringing his face level with Ryan's. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me every copy of those documents, every file, every photo, every scrap of paper. And in return, I'll let you and your daughter leave this town safely. And if I refuse, then I destroy you. Victor's voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath now. Your business gets condemned for environmental hazards. Your daughter gets taken by child services for neglect. You get arrested for theft, fraud, and a dozen other charges I haven't invented yet. By the time the legal system is done with you, you'll wish you'd taken my offer. Chen spoke up. You can't make those charges stick. We have evidence that proves, evidence nobody will believe, Victor interrupted. Because by the time my lawyers and my media contacts are done, Ryan Cole will be a desperate man who forged documents to frame an innocent businessman, a conspiracy theorist who couldn't accept his brother's accidental death, a bad father who put his own vendetta ahead of his child's well-being. He straightened up and walked back to the window. I've been building this network for 20 years. You really think 2 weeks with a deposit box is going to bring it down? Ryan looked at Chen. The lawyer's face was carefully blank, giving nothing away. Ryan thought about the USB drive in his pocket, about the copies already uploaded to cloud storage, about all the backups they'd created. Victor couldn't suppress everything. He was too confident, too used to winning. And that was his weakness. You're right, Ryan said slowly. I can't beat you, not alone, not with the resources I have. Victor turned from the window, satisfaction on his face. Finally, some sense. But Marcus did. He documented everything you've done. And once that information gets out, really out, not just to local authorities you control, but to federal investigators, national media, people beyond your reach, your network falls apart. You're bluffing. If you'd already released that information, I'd know. Maybe I am bluffing. Ryan met Victor's eyes. Or maybe I'm just waiting for the right moment, when it'll do the most damage, when you're exposed and vulnerable and there's nothing you can do to stop it. The room went silent. Morrison's hand tightened on Ryan's shoulder, a warning. Chen sat perfectly still, barely breathing. Victor studied Ryan for a long moment. Then he smiled, a genuine smile that was somehow more terrifying than his anger would have been. You're your brother's brother after all, Victor said. Marcus played the same game. Threats and brinksmanship, acting like he held all the cards. He walked back to the table and sat down across from Ryan. But here's the thing about bluffing, Mr. Cole. Eventually, someone calls your hand, and then you better have something to show. He snapped his fingers. Morrison pulled out a tablet and set it on the table, screen facing Ryan. Security footage played on it. The bank that morning, Ryan entering, Jimmy letting him into the vault, Ryan emerging 45 minutes later. We have eyes everywhere, Victor said. Victor Oscar. We know you accessed the deposit box. We know you took documents. What we don't know is where they are now. He paused. Yet. Another snap. Morrison left the room and returned moments later, dragging someone Ryan didn't expect. Isabella stumbled through the door, hands zip-tied, face pale with fear. Behind her came Sophie, clutching a stuffed rabbit, eyes wide and terrified. Ryan shot to his feet. You son of a... Morrison's fist caught him in the stomach, doubling him over. Chen grabbed Ryan's arm, holding him back from doing something that would get them both killed. Victor didn't even glance at Isabella and Sophie. Sit down, Mr. Cole, before I lose my patience. Ryan sat, fighting to breathe through the pain. Isabella was mouthing something at him, but he couldn't make it out. Sophie was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Here's my final offer, Victor said. You give me the documents, all of them, every copy, every backup, every photograph. You sign an affidavit stating that you attempted to forge evidence against me for personal gain. You sell me your property for exactly $1, and in return, I let Isabella and Sophie go. They leave this town tonight, and they never come back. And me? You stay. You work for me, running shipments through your yard, keeping your mouth shut, being useful. You're a single father, Mr. Cole. You need money to raise your daughter. I'll pay you well. Everyone wins. Ryan looked at Isabella, at Sophie, at Chen sitting beside him with blood trickling from his nose where someone had hit him when Ryan wasn't looking. Marcus had died rather than make this deal, had sabotaged his own car, destroyed evidence, chosen death over surrender. But Marcus hadn't had Lily to protect, hadn't had a little girl waiting at home who trusted her father to keep her safe. Ryan thought about the USB drive in his pocket, about the files already uploaded and distributed, about Chen's copies and backups and fail-safes, and he thought about something Victor had said. Eventually someone calls your hand. Time to show his cards. Okay, Ryan said quietly. I'll give you the documents. Victor's eyebrows rose. Just like that? Just like that, on one condition. You're not in a position to negotiate conditions. Let Chen verify that Isabella and Sophie get out safely. Let him drive them to the state line himself. Once he confirms they're safe, I'll tell you where every copy is hidden. Victor considered this. Isabella was shaking her head violently, mouthing words Ryan still couldn't understand. But Sophie was here, terrified and crying, and that made the decision easy. Fine, Victor said. Chen drives them out. But if I don't have those documents in my hands by midnight tonight, everyone you care about pays the price. Understood? Understood. Victor snapped his fingers again. Morrison cut Isabella's zip ties and pulled her to her feet. She fought against him, trying to reach Ryan. Don't do this, she said, her voice breaking. Ryan, don't. Take Sophie and go, Ryan said firmly. Chen will make sure you're safe. That's all that matters. Your brother died for this. I know, and I'm not throwing that away, I promise. Ryan locked eyes with her, trying to convey everything he couldn't say out loud. Trust me, I have a plan. This isn't surrender. Whether she understood or not, he couldn't tell. Morrison pulled her toward the door. Chen stood slowly, his lawyer's face back in place, giving nothing away. I'll need my car keys, Chen said. Victor tossed them across the table. You have until midnight. Don't make me come looking for you. Chen picked up the keys and walked to Isabella. He put a hand on her shoulder, steadying her, then took Sophie's hand gently. The little girl looked back at Ryan one more time, still clutching Marcus's photograph against her chest. Then they were gone. The door closed, and Ryan was alone with Victor Langston and the men who'd killed his brother. Victor poured himself a drink from a decanter on the sideboard. He didn't offer Ryan any. Smart choice, Victor said. For a moment there, I thought you were going to be as stupid as Marcus. But you're a father first. I can respect that. Ryan said nothing. He was counting the seconds in his head, calculating how long it would take Chen to get Isabella and Sophie somewhere safe. How long before the USB drive's content started circulating to every backup contact he'd programmed in. Victor didn't know about the dead man's switch Ryan had set up that morning. The automated emails programmed to send if Ryan didn't check in every 12 hours. The copies distributed to journalists and FBI field offices across 3 states, all scheduled to deliver simultaneously. Marcus had left insurance, but Ryan had left a bomb, and the timer was already counting down. Where are the documents? Victor asked. Victor's. Ryan smiled. It felt strange on his face, wrong somehow, but he smiled anyway. Everywhere, he said. And you'll never find them all. Victor's expression darkened. We had a deal. No, you had a threat. I had a choice, and I chose to finish what my brother started. Ryan stood slowly, testing whether Morrison would stop him. The detective didn't move. You killed Marcus because he wouldn't be controlled, because he found proof of what you really are. And you think threatening more people, hurting more families, will somehow make this go away. Sit down, Mr. Cole. But here's the thing about truth, Victor. It doesn't care how powerful you are. It doesn't care how many people you own or how many threats you make. It just exists. And once it's out there, once enough people know it, you can't put it back in the box. Victor set down his drink. Morrison, show Mr. Cole what happens to people who don't keep their deals. Morrison moved toward Ryan. But before he could reach him, the conference room door burst open. Federal agents in tactical gear flooded in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Morrison went for his gun and hit the floor as 2 agents tackled him. The other officers scattered, hands up, faces shocked. Victor Langston stood frozen at the window, his untouchable confidence cracking like thin ice. Victor Langston, the lead agent said, approaching with handcuffs ready. You're under arrest for racketeering, money laundering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent. Ryan stepped back as agents secured the room. His knees felt weak. He hadn't known if the plan would work, if Chen would manage to contact the FBI in time, if they'd believe the evidence enough to move this fast. But they had. And it had worked. An agent approached Ryan. Mr. Cole? I'm Special Agent Sarah Park, FBI. Your lawyer, Mr. Chen contacted our office this morning with documentation of illegal operations. We've been watching this facility for the past 3 hours. David Park, Ryan said, the pieces clicking together. Marcus listed you as trustee. Agent Park smiled. My husband. Marcus came to him 2 years ago with preliminary evidence. David died 6 months later. Heart attack, supposedly. Her expression hardened. I promised him I'd finish what he started. When your lawyer reached out today with the full documentation, I kept that promise. Ryan watched as agents led Victor Langston out in handcuffs. The man who'd controlled the town for 20 years looked small suddenly, diminished, human and fallible, and caught. Is it over? Ryan asked. The arrests are just beginning. We have warrants for the police chief, the harbor master, 12 others. This is going to tear through the entire power structure. Agent Park handed him a business card. But you're going to need protection. Langston's network is bigger than just the people in this room. Some of them will want revenge. Ryan pocketed the card. What about Isabella and Sophie? Safe. Your lawyer got them to a federal safe house 2 hours ago. They'll stay there until we're sure it's secure. She hesitated. And Mr. Cole? Your brother would be proud. What you did today took courage. Ryan's eyes burned. He blinked hard. I just finished what he started. That's what courage is. They let him go 20 minutes later, after statements and documentation and promises to testify when the time came. Ryan walked out of the warehouse into late afternoon sunlight that seemed too bright, too normal for what had just happened. His truck was waiting where Morrison had left it. The keys were in the ignition. Ryan sat behind the wheel for a long moment, hands shaking too badly to drive. Then he called Mrs. Chen from a borrowed phone. She answered on the first ring. Ryan? Thank the stars. Lily's been worried sick. Where are you? Coming home. Is she okay? She's fine. Making more cookies to keep busy. What happened? I'll explain when I get there. His voice broke. Just keep her safe for another hour, please. Of course. Ryan, are you all right? He wasn't. He might never be all right again, but Marcus's murderer was in handcuffs. Isabella and Sophie were safe. And somewhere, his brother's sacrifice finally meant something. Yeah, Ryan said. I'm all right. He ended the call and started the truck. The drive home felt like it took forever and no time at all. His mind kept replaying everything. Victor's face as the agents read his rights, Morrison hitting the floor. Isabella's desperate eyes as Chen led her away. The salvage yard appeared ahead, familiar and home. Ryan pulled in and killed the engine. Through the kitchen window, he could see Lily at the table, flower in her hair, laughing at something Mrs. Chen said. His daughter, safe. Because Ryan had made the hard choice. Because he'd trusted the right people at the right time. Because he'd refused to let Victor Langston win. Ryan got out and walked toward the house. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Documents received. Case built. Thank you. Agent Park. Another text. This one from Chen. Isabella and Sophie secure. They asked me to thank you. So did I. Ryan deleted both messages and put the phone away. Inside, Lily looked up and saw him through the window. Her face transformed, joy replacing worry, and she ran to the door. Dad, you're home. Did you fix the grown-up stuff? Ryan caught her as she launched herself at him, holding her tight enough that she squirmed. Yeah, monster. I fixed it. So we're not losing the house? No, we're keeping everything. Lily pulled back to look at him. Her eyes were too sharp, seeing past the smile to the exhaustion underneath. You look sad even though you fixed it, she said quietly. Ryan carried her inside and set her on the counter beside the cooling cookies. How did you explain to an 8-year-old that winning sometimes felt like losing? That justice came at costs you couldn't calculate until after you'd paid them? Sometimes grown-up problems are complicated, he said finally. Even when you fix them, they still hurt. Lily nodded solemnly, like this made perfect sense. Then she handed him a cookie. These ones aren't burned. I saved them for you. Ryan bit into the cookie even though his throat was too tight to swallow properly. It tasted like chocolate and love and normal life, everything he'd been fighting to protect. Perfect, he managed. Best cookies ever. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, reading his face in the way only she could. She didn't ask questions, just squeezed his shoulder as she passed. I'll leave you two alone. Call if you need anything. After she left, Ryan and Lily sat together at the counter, eating cookies and not talking about the things that mattered most. Eventually, Lily fell asleep against his shoulder, exhausted from worry and cookies and relief. Ryan carried her to bed and tucked her in, watching her sleep the way he did sometimes when nightmares woke him at 3 a.m. and he needed to confirm she was real and safe. Downstairs, he finally let himself break, sat at the kitchen table and put his head in his hands and cried for his brother, for 3 lost years, for Isabella trapped in a marriage to a monster, for Sophie growing up without her father. He cried until there was nothing left. Then he washed his face, made coffee, and started planning. Because arrests were just the beginning. Trials would follow, testimonies, media coverage, the whole ugly truth laid bare for the town to see. And through all of it, Ryan would have to protect Lily from the worst of it. Would have to keep running the salvage yard and being her father and pretending that the world made sense. But tonight, for now, it was enough to have won. To have fought and survived and protected the people who mattered. Marcus would have been proud. Ryan hoped wherever his brother was, he knew that his sacrifice hadn't been in vain, that the truth had finally come out, that the monster was caged. Ryan's phone rang. Chen's number on the borrowed phone. It's all over the news, the lawyer said without preamble. FBI arrests at the port. Victor Langston in custody. They're calling it the biggest corruption case in state history. Good. Good? Ryan, this is going to get ugly. Victor's lawyers will fight back. Media will dig into everything. You're going to be in the spotlight whether you want to be or not. I know. And you're ready for that? Ryan looked around his small kitchen, at Lily's drawings on the refrigerator, at the salvage yard visible through the window, at the ordinary life he'd fought so hard to keep. No, he said honestly, but I'll figure it out. For her. Chen was quiet for a moment. Marcus chose the right person to trust, you know that? I just finished what he started. You did more than that. You won. Chen paused. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be intense. The call ended. Ryan set the phone down and finished his coffee. Outside, the sun was setting over the salvage yard, painting everything gold and orange. Beautiful, despite everything. Ryan thought about Marcus, about the letter, about insurance and sacrifice and brothers who fought monsters even when they knew the cost. And he understood now. Understood why Marcus couldn't walk away. Why he'd chosen to fight even knowing what Victor might do. Because some things were worth more than safety, worth more than comfort, worth more than life itself. Truth, justice, protecting the people you loved. Ryan stood and walked to the window. The salvage yard needed work. The house needed repairs. Lily needed a father who could be present instead of drowning in grief and rage. But tonight, the world was a little bit better. One monster in handcuffs, one town set free from 20 years of corruption. Tomorrow would bring challenges, trials and media and complications Ryan couldn't anticipate. But tonight, they'd won, and that was enough. Ryan woke to the sound of gravel crunching in the driveway. For a confused moment, he thought it was morning, that he'd overslept, and customers were already arriving at the salvage yard. Then he saw the red numbers on the bedside clock glowing 2:47 a.m., and his stomach dropped. He was out of bed and moving before conscious thought caught up. Down the hallway, past Lily's room where she slept undisturbed, down the stairs 3 at a time. Through the kitchen window, he could see headlights cutting through the darkness. Multiple vehicles, not customers. Ryan grabbed his phone from the counter and dialed Chen's number while moving toward the door. The lawyer answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the hour. They're already starting, Chen said before Ryan could speak. Channel 7 just broke the story. Federal corruption investigation, arrests at the port. Every news outlet in the state is scrambling. There are cars outside my house right now. Reporters. I warned you this would happen fast. Chen's voice was grim. Don't talk to them. Not yet. Anything you say will be twisted, used against you in court when Victor's lawyers start their defense. What about Lily? She has school in 5 hours. Keep her home. This is going to be a circus for the next few days. I'll file paperwork for witness protection, temporary relocation if needed. Ryan's hand tightened on the phone. We're not running. This is our home. Ryan, I didn't fight Victor Langston to lose my home anyway. We're staying. Chen sighed. Then at least don't answer the door, don't engage, let me handle media relations. A knock echoed through the house, sharp and insistent, then another. Ryan could see shapes moving outside, figures with cameras and microphones pressing against the windows. I have to go, Ryan said. Don't talk to them. Ryan ended the call and stood in his dark kitchen watching the reporters multiply like roaches drawn to light. This was the cost Chen had warned about. The spotlight, the scrutiny, the loss of privacy that came with taking down powerful men. Another knock. Louder now. A voice calling through the door. Mr. Cole, just a few questions. The public has a right to know. Upstairs, a door opened. Small footsteps on hardwood. Ryan turned to see Lily at the top of the stairs, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her stuffed rabbit dragging behind her. Dad, why are there people outside? Ryan climbed the stairs quickly and scooped her up before she could see the cameras. Just some confused folks, nothing to worry about. Come on, back to bed. But it's loud. I know, monster, but we're going to ignore them, like when the neighbor's dog won't stop barking. He carried her back to her room and tucked her in, pulling the curtains tight against the glare of headlights below. Try to sleep, okay? Are we in trouble? The question broke his heart. No, sweetheart. We did the right thing, but sometimes doing the right thing makes noise. It'll calm down soon. Lily studied his face with those two sharp eyes. You promise? Ryan thought about Victor in handcuffs, about the federal investigation spreading through the town like wildfire, about everything that was about to come crashing down on their quiet life. I promise we'll be okay, he said, choosing his words carefully. Whatever happens, we're going to be okay. She seemed satisfied with that. Her eyes drifted closed. Ryan sat on the edge of her bed until her breathing evened out, then returned downstairs to face the siege. The knocking had stopped, but the vehicles remained, a vigil of cameras and reporters waiting for dawn. Ryan made coffee and sat at the kitchen table in darkness, watching them watch his house. His phone buzzed constantly. Unknown numbers, blocked calls, text messages from reporters who'd somehow gotten his contact information. At 4 a.m., Mrs. Chen's car pulled into the driveway, scattering reporters like startled birds. The elderly woman emerged with a baseball bat in one hand and a covered dish in the other, her expression fierce enough to make grown men back away. Vultures, she shouted at the nearest camera crew. This is private property. You have 30 seconds to get off this driveway before I start swinging. Ryan opened the door quickly and pulled her inside. Mrs. Chen set the bat down and handed him the dish. Breakfast casserole? She said briskly. Lily will need something substantial today. And so will you. You didn't have to. Of course I did. The whole town is talking. Half of them are thrilled Victor's finally getting what he deserves. The other half are terrified about what comes next. She moved to the window and glared at the reporters. But everyone agrees you're either very brave or very stupid. I'm voting brave. Ryan managed to smile. Thanks. The question is, what happens now? Those federal agents arrested Victor? Yes. But they also arrested Chief Morrison, the harbor master, 3 council members. The town's leadership is in shambles. That's not my problem to solve. Mrs. Chen turned from the window, her expression knowing. Isn't it? You're the one who started this. People are going to look to you for answers. I'm not a leader. I'm just a guy who wanted to save his business. You're the man who took down Victor Langston. Whether you wanted that role or not, you have it now. She squeezed his shoulder. But first, breakfast. Can't fight battles on an empty stomach. They ate together in the pre-dawn quiet, Mrs. Chen chattering about neighborhood gossip and her grandson's college applications. Normal things that felt surreal against the backdrop of news vans parked outside. Ryan was grateful for her presence, for the way she made chaos feel manageable. At 6 a.m., Chen called again. Turn on channel 7. Ryan found the remote and switched on the television. His own face filled the screen, a photo pulled from somewhere, looking tired and unshaven. The caption read, Whistleblower exposes decades of corruption. The news anchor spoke in serious tones. Federal agents arrested prominent businessman Victor Langston and 12 others late yesterday in what prosecutors are calling the largest corruption case in state history. Documents provided by local salvage yard owner Ryan Cole revealed a network of illegal shipping operations, bribes, and cover-ups stretching back 20 years. The screen cut to footage of Victor being led from the warehouse in handcuffs, his lawyer shouting about illegal searches and wrongful arrest. Then back to the anchor. Langston's legal team has already filed motions to dismiss, claiming the evidence was obtained illegally and that Cole fabricated documents to frame their client. More on this developing story as information becomes available. Ryan muted the television. His hands had started shaking again. Fabricated documents. That was Victor's play. Discredit the evidence, discredit the witness, make the whole thing collapse under reasonable doubt. "They're going to tear me apart," Ryan said quietly. Mrs. Chen took the remote and switched off the TV. "Let them try. You have the truth on your side, and the FBI. They wouldn't have made arrests without verifying the evidence first. You don't know Victor's lawyers. They're the best money can buy. And you have something better. You have a town full of people who've been waiting 20 years for someone to stand up to that man." She stood and started clearing dishes. "But right now, you need to focus on Lily. Keep her routine normal. Let the lawyers handle the legal battle." Ryan wanted to believe her, but he'd seen the reporters outside, felt the weight of what was coming. This wasn't just a legal battle. This was war, and Victor would use every weapon he had. The morning deteriorated from there. By 8 a.m., 3 more news vans had arrived. Someone leaked Ryan's address online, and curious onlookers started driving past, slowing down to gawk. A reporter managed to get to the front door before Ryan could stop him, shouting questions through the mail slot until Mrs. Chen threatened to call the police. The irony wasn't lost on Ryan. The police force was currently being investigated by federal agents. Half of them were probably being interrogated right now about their connections to Victor's network. At 9 a.m., Agent Park called. "Mr. Cole, I need you to come to our temporary field office. We have some developments." "What kind of developments?" "The kind we should discuss in person. Can you be here by 10? Ryan looked at Mrs. Chen, who nodded. "I'll watch Lily," she mouthed. "I'll be there," Ryan told Agent Park. Getting out of his own driveway required running a gauntlet of reporters. They swarmed the truck the moment Ryan started the engine, pressing cameras against windows, shouting questions he couldn't hear over each other. "Mr. Cole, is it true you broke into the deposit box illegally? Did you forge the shipping manifests? How long have you been planning to frame Victor Langston?" Ryan kept his eyes forward and drove slowly, letting them scatter rather than risk hitting someone. By the time he reached the street, his shirt was soaked with sweat despite the cool morning air. The FBI field office was temporarily set up in the county courthouse, ironically the same building where Victor's influence had killed so many investigations over the years. Federal agents had taken over 2 floors, transforming them into command centers bristling with computers and evidence boxes. Agent Park met him in the lobby. She looked like she hadn't slept, coffee cup in hand, dark circles under her eyes. "Thank you for coming," she said, leading him through security. "We've been processing evidence all night. The scope of this operation is staggering." "How bad?" 23 years. That's how far back the financial records go. Millions of dollars in contraband moved through the port, bribes to officials in 3 counties, evidence tampering in at least 18 criminal cases. She paused at an elevator. "Your brother wasn't the first person Victor killed to protect this. He was just the first one we can prove." Ryan's stomach turned. "How many others?" "We're still investigating, but there are at least 4 suspicious deaths over the past decade. All people who either worked for Victor and knew too much, or who tried to expose him like Marcus did." The elevator doors opened onto a floor transformed into organized chaos. Agents moved between desks covered in files. Evidence boxes were stacked along the walls. Whiteboards mapped out connections between Victor's network members like a spider's web. Agent Park led Ryan to a conference room where another agent waited. He was older, silver-haired, with the kind of face that had seen too much and forgiven too little. "This is Special Agent Marcus Webb, head of the investigation," Park said. Webb stood and shook Ryan's hand with a grip that could crack walnuts. "Your brother was a good man, Mr. Cole. What he documented here saved us years of investigation. He died for it. Yes, and we're going to make sure that means something." Webb gestured to a chair. "But I need to be honest with you about what's coming. Victor Langston's legal team is already mounting an aggressive defense. They're claiming the evidence was planted, that you had personal vendetta, that nothing Marcus documented can be trusted. That's bullshit. The shipping manifests alone can be dismissed as clerical errors or explained away as legitimate business, Webb interrupted. We need more than documents. We need testimony from people inside the network. We need witnesses willing to flip on Victor and confirm what the evidence shows. Ryan leaned back. Have you gotten any? 3 so far. Small fish, people Victor used for manual labor and transport, but they can only confirm what they saw directly, which isn't enough to tie Victor to the conspiracy. Webb pulled out a file and opened it. What we really need is someone from Victor's inner circle. Someone who knows how the operation worked, who gave orders, where the money went. Good luck with that. Everyone who worked closely with Victor is either arrested or running scared. Park spoke up. Not everyone. Isabella Langston was married into the family. She had access to Victor's home office, his personal files, his private conversations. If she's willing to testify, no. Ryan's response was immediate. She's been through enough. You're not dragging her through a trial. Mr. Cole, with all respect, this isn't your decision. If we subpoena her, then I'll fight it. Get your own witnesses. Leave Isabella alone. Webb and Park exchanged glances. Finally, Webb closed the file. All right, we'll pursue other avenues, but understand this. Without stronger testimony, Victor walks. His lawyers will create reasonable doubt, pick apart every document, question every piece of evidence. And when the jury sees a desperate man trying to frame a respected businessman, they'll acquit. So what do you want from me? Your testimony at the preliminary hearing next week. We need you to walk the judge through how you obtained the evidence, what Marcus told you, everything. Can you do that? Ryan thought about the reporters outside his house, about Lily asking if they were in trouble, about the years of legal battles ahead, testifying and cross-examination, and watching Victor's lawyers try to destroy him on the stand. But he also thought about Marcus's letter, about Sophie looking at her father's photograph with hunger in her eyes, about 23 years of corruption finally seeing daylight. Yeah, Ryan said, I can do that. The meeting lasted another hour. They walked him through what to expect, how to handle hostile questioning, what Victor's defense would likely focus on. By the time Ryan left the courthouse, his head was spinning with legal terminology and strategic concerns. He drove home on autopilot, barely noticing the route. The reporters were still camped outside his house, but their numbers had thinned. Apparently watching an empty driveway wasn't exciting enough to maintain a full siege. Inside, Mrs. Chen had Lily at the kitchen table working on homework. The scene was so normal, so domestic, that Ryan felt something in his chest unknot slightly. How'd it go? Mrs. Chen asked quietly while Lily focused on her math problems. About as well as expected. Trial prep starts next week. And Isabella? Ryan shook his head. They wanted her to testify. I refused. Mrs. Chen's expression was approving. Good. That woman has suffered enough. Lily looked up from her homework. Is Aunt Isabella okay? I heard Mrs. Chen talking about her on the phone. Ryan crossed to the table and ruffled her hair. She's fine, monster. Just staying somewhere safe for a little while. Can we visit her? Maybe soon. First we have some grown-up stuff to finish, and Lily made a face. There's always grown-up stuff. Tell me about it, Ryan agreed. He looked at her homework. How's the math going? Terrible. I hate fractions. Me too, but we've got to learn them anyway. He pulled up a chair beside her. Show me what you're working on. They spent the next hour on fractions and homework, the most normal thing Ryan had done in days. Mrs. Chen bustled around making dinner. The reporters outside eventually gave up and left. For a brief window, life felt almost ordinary again. Then Ryan's phone rang. Chen's number. Turn on the news, the lawyer said without preamble. Ryan grabbed the remote with a feeling of dread. Channel 7 was in the middle of a breaking news segment. Victor Langston's face filled the screen, but this wasn't arrest footage. This was professional camera work, a statement being read from prepared notes. Victor stood outside his lawyer's office, flanked by men in expensive suits. He looked tired but defiant, every inch the wronged businessman fighting false accusations. I want to address the malicious allegations being made against me and my family, Victor said, his voice steady. For 3 years, Ryan Cole has harbored resentment over his brother's tragic accidental death. Instead of accepting the truth, he has concocted an elaborate conspiracy theory, going so far as to forge documents and manipulate evidence to support his delusions. Ryan's jaw clenched. Mrs. Chen moved closer to the television. Victor continued, "My legal team has already identified multiple inconsistencies in the so-called evidence. Dates that don't match shipping records, signatures that don't match known samples, financial transactions that have legitimate business explanations. This is a vendetta, pure and simple, by a desperate man trying to profit from tragedy." The reporter interrupted. "Mr. Langston, federal agents arrested you based on this evidence. Are you saying the FBI was fooled?" Victor's expression was sorrowful, perfectly calibrated for the cameras. "I'm saying that when someone presents documentation that appears authentic on the surface, even experienced investigators can be temporarily misled. But the truth will emerge. My lawyers are already filing motions to exclude the fabricated evidence and seeking charges against Mr. Cole for fraud and perjury. What about the other arrests, the police chief, the council members? Colleagues who are equally innocent caught up in this witch hunt. We will all be exonerated once the facts are properly examined." Victor leaned closer to the microphone. "And I want to say this directly to Mr. Cole. I understand you're grieving. I understand you need someone to blame for your brother's death. But destroying innocent lives won't bring Marcus back. It's time to accept the truth and stop this destructive campaign." The segment cut back to the studio. The anchor was already bringing in a legal expert to discuss the case. Ryan muted the television before they could start dissecting every word. "He's good," Mrs. Chen said quietly. "I'll give him that. He sounds completely sincere. He's had practice lying." Ryan set down the remote with more force than necessary. 23 years of practice. His phone rang again. Agent Park this time. "I saw the statement," Ryan said before she could speak. "So did we. And we expected it. Langston's team is trying to poison public opinion before the preliminary hearing. Don't engage. Don't respond. Let his lawyers talk to the media while we build our case." He called me delusional on national television. "And if you respond, you give them ammunition. Stay silent. Let your testimony in court speak for itself." Ryan wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. Fighting Victor in the media was a losing battle. The man had resources and connections and decades of experience manipulating public perception. The next 3 days were torture. Victor's legal team launched a full-scale media campaign, granting interviews, releasing carefully edited portions of business records that supposedly disproved the fraud allegations, painting Ryan as an unstable man driven by grief to destroy an innocent family. The town split down the middle. Half the residents rallied behind Ryan, people who'd been hurt by Victor's business practices over the years and were thrilled to see him finally facing consequences. They left supportive messages on Ryan's doorstep, offered help with legal expenses, organized community meetings to discuss cleaning up corruption. The other half believed Victor's narrative, or at least found it easier to accept than the alternative. If Victor was guilty, what did that say about the town that had elevated him, trusted him, done business with him for decades? Better to believe Ryan was lying than confront their own complicity. Lily's school became a battlefield. Other parents whispered in parking lots. Some pulled their children away from Lily at recess. One mother confronted Ryan during pickup, accusing him of teaching his daughter to lie and manipulate just like he was doing to poor Mr. Langston. Ryan nearly lost his temper. Mrs. Chen intervened, placing herself physically between Ryan and the angry mother, suggesting everyone take a breath and remember these were children who didn't deserve to be caught in adult problems. That night, Ryan seriously considered Chen's suggestion about temporary relocation. Pack up Lily and disappear until the trial ended. But running felt like admitting defeat, and Ryan was done running. On the 4th day, something changed. A reporter from the Portland Tribune published an investigative piece examining Victor's business history. She'd spent years documenting suspicious patterns, deaths, and disappearances that coincided with people opposing Langston interests. The article didn't accuse Victor of anything directly, but the implications were clear. And it included interviews with families who'd lost loved ones under circumstances that were never properly investigated. Marcus's case was prominently featured. The reporter had obtained the original police report and compared it to Marcus's maintenance records for his vehicle. The brakes that supposedly failed had been serviced by Marcus himself 2 days before his death. A mechanic interviewed for the article stated that catastrophic brake failure was nearly impossible on a vehicle that new and well maintained. Public opinion started to shift. Maybe Ryan wasn't delusional. Maybe there was something to his accusations after all. Victor's lawyers fired back with their own investigators, people willing to testify that Marcus had been drinking the night he died, that his marriage was troubled, that he'd been acting erratically in the weeks before the accident. Character assassination disguised as fact-finding. Ryan wanted to scream, wanted to find Victor and make him answer for every lie, every manipulation, every life destroyed. Instead, he focused on Lily, helped with homework, made dinners, read bedtime stories, maintained the small rituals that kept their life stable, even as everything around them burned. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for Monday morning. Ryan spent Sunday going over his testimony with Chen, rehearsing answers to hostile questions, preparing for the legal assault Victor's team would launch. "They're going to attack your credibility," Chen warned. "Your financial troubles, your single-parent status, anything they can use to paint you as unreliable or desperate." "I know. And they'll suggest you had motive to forge documents, that you needed money and thought framing Victor would lead to a settlement." "I know." Chen studied him. "You're remarkably calm." Ryan looked out the window at the salvage yard, at the ordinary life he'd built from scraps and stubbornness. "I'm tired of being scared. Victor's already taken too much. My brother, 3 years of grief, my peace of mind. He doesn't get to take my dignity, too." Monday morning arrived cold and gray. Ryan dressed in his only suit, a second-hand affair that didn't quite fit right, but looked respectable enough. Mrs. So. Chen arrived early to stay with Lily, who hugged Ryan tight before he left. "You're going to do great, Dad," she whispered. "Uncle Marcus would be proud." The words nearly broke him. Ryan kissed her forehead and headed for the courthouse before emotion could overwhelm his resolve. The building was surrounded by media. Cameras tracked Ryan's approach, reporters shouting questions he ignored. Inside, security was tight. Federal agents and local officers working together, an uneasy alliance necessitated by the investigation's scope. Chen met him in the hallway outside the courtroom. The lawyer looked exhausted but grimly satisfied. "3 more witnesses flipped this morning," Chen said quietly. "Mid-level operators in Victor's network. They're willing to testify in exchange for reduced sentences." "That's good, right?" "It's excellent. It means we're not relying solely on documentary evidence. We have people who can confirm what the records show." Chen adjusted his tie. "But today is still crucial. The judge needs to believe there's enough evidence to proceed to trial. If Victor's lawyers convince him the case is weak, everything falls apart." They entered the courtroom together. It was packed, standing room only, spectators crowding every available space. Ryan saw familiar faces from town. Supporters and detractors sitting on opposite sides like a wedding gone wrong. And at the defense table, flanked by 5 lawyers in suits that cost more than Ryan's truck, sat Victor Langston. He looked smaller somehow. The courtroom stripped away his usual commanding presence, reducing him to just another defendant waiting for judgment. When Victor's eyes met Ryan's, there was no recognition, no acknowledgement, just cold calculation, a predator assessing prey. The bailiff called for order. Judge Patricia Morrison entered, and Ryan's heart sank. Same last name as the police chief, same family that had served Victor's interests for years. Chen must have seen his expression. "Different branch of the family," he whispered, "and she has a reputation for integrity. We got lucky." The preliminary hearing began. The prosecutor, a federal attorney named Catherine Reeves, presented the government's case methodically, documents showing illegal transactions, testimony from the witnesses who'd flipped, a timeline connecting Victor to the conspiracy. Then it was Ryan's turn. He took the stand with hands that wanted to shake, but didn't, kept steady through sheer force of will. Reeves walked him through the events, how he'd received the velvet box from Isabella, what he'd found in the deposit box, Marcus's letter explaining the investigation. "And did you believe your brother's account?" Reeves asked. "Yes." Marcus didn't lie, and the evidence supported everything he wrote. "Thank you, Mr. Cole." No further questions. Then Victor's lead attorney stood. Harrison Blackwell was legendary in legal circles, a man who'd gotten 3 impossible acquittals and made careers out of destroying witnesses. He approached the stand like a shark circling prey. Mr. Cole, you've stated that your brother Marcus documented criminal activity by my client, but isn't it true that you and Marcus had a strained relationship in the months before his death? We were fine. Really? Because bank records show Marcus loaned you $15,000 8 months before he died, a loan you never repaid. Ryan's jaw tightened. I was making payments, then he died. How convenient. Blackwell's smile was predatory. And isn't it true that after Marcus's death, you expected to inherit his share of the family business, but instead everything went to Isabella? That's not... Yes or no, Mr. Cole? Did you expect to inherit? I didn't think about it. I was grieving. But you were angry at Marcus for leaving debts, angry at Isabella for inheriting, angry enough to fabricate evidence that would implicate both of them in criminal activity. That's not true, isn't it? You had motive to frame my client. You had opportunity through access to Marcus's personal files, and you had means through your knowledge of the salvage and shipping industry. Blackwell was in full attack mode now. Mr. Cole, how much did you stand to gain if Victor Langston's property was seized and auctioned? Ryan forced himself to breathe slowly. Chen had warned him about this. Stay calm. Answer truthfully. Don't let them rattle you. I stood to gain nothing. I did this because my brother was murdered, and someone needed to answer for it. Murdered, based on your interpretation of maintenance records and speculation. Based on evidence. Based on what Marcus documented before he died. Documentation you claim came from a deposit box. But we only have your word that these papers were actually in that box. You could have created them yourself. The bank has records. The deposit box existed. Marcus created it 3 years ago. A box existing doesn't prove what was in it. For all we know, you placed those documents there yourself last week. Blackwell pivoted smoothly. Mr. Cole, have you ever been diagnosed with any psychological conditions? Reeves shot to her feet. Objection. Relevance. Goes to witness credibility, Your Honor. If Mr. Cole has been treated for conditions that affect perception or judgment, I'll allow it, Judge Morrison said. Within reason. Blackwell turned back to Ryan. Well? I saw a grief counselor after my wife died. That's not a psychological condition. That's being human. And during this counseling, did you ever express anger toward authority figures? Feelings of persecution? Paranoid thoughts? Ryan saw where this was going. They were going to paint him as unstable, delusional, someone whose testimony couldn't be trusted. And the worst part was some of it was true. He had been angry. He had felt persecuted when the liens appeared. But that didn't make Victor innocent. I expressed normal grief responses, Ryan said carefully, which my counselor assured me were healthy. I never had paranoid delusions. I had legitimate concerns about my brother's death that turned out to be justified. Blackwell continued the assault for another 30 minutes, picking apart every detail, creating doubt where none should exist. By the time he finished, Ryan felt wrung out, exhausted from maintaining composure under hostile fire. But he'd survived. And more importantly, he'd told the truth. The hearing continued with other witnesses. Agent Park testified about the investigation's scope. Jimmy from the bank confirmed the deposit box's existence and access records. Chen presented affidavits from the 3 witnesses who'd flipped. Finally, Judge Morrison called for closing arguments. Reeves went first, methodically laying out why the evidence warranted a full trial. Then Blackwell painted Ryan as a grieving man who'd crossed into obsession, manipulating evidence to support conspiracy theories. The judge took a brief recess to review materials. When she returned 20 minutes later, the courtroom fell silent. I've considered the evidence presented and the arguments from both counsel, Judge Morrison said. The defense raises legitimate questions about chain of custody and witness credibility. However, the prosecution has presented substantial documentation that warrants further examination. The court finds sufficient probable cause to proceed to trial. Relief flooded through Ryan. Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or rage. Bail is set at $5 million, Judge Morrison continued. Trial date will be scheduled within 90 days. This hearing is adjourned. The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed for the exits. Victor's lawyers surrounded him, already planning their next move. Chen grabbed Ryan's arm and steered him toward a side door before the media could swarm. They emerged into a quiet hallway. Ryan leaned against the wall and allowed himself one moment of weakness, of shaking hands and trembling knees. "You did it," Chen said. "You got us to trial. Victor's going to make bail. Probably, but he'll be monitored, and we have 90 days to build an even stronger case." Chen smiled, the first genuine expression Ryan had seen from him in days. "Your brother would be proud." Ryan's phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen with a photo of Lily wearing his old tool belt, pretending to fix something in the yard. The caption read, "Future mechanic says she's ready to take over the family business." Ryan smiled despite everything. "I need to get home." "Go. You've done enough for today. The legal team will handle the rest." Ryan left through the side exit, avoiding the media circus out front. The drive home felt lighter somehow, despite knowing the war was far from over. Victor would make bail. The trial would be brutal. But they'd cleared the first hurdle. At home, Lily tackled him in the driveway, still wearing the tool belt. "Did you win?" "Not yet, but we're getting there." "Good." She grabbed his hand. "Come see what I fixed. The gate wasn't closing right, so I tightened the screws." Ryan let her pull him toward the salvage yard, listening to her chatter about hinges and measurements. This was what he was fighting for. Not revenge, not justice, though that would be nice. Simple moments. A daughter who wanted to fix things. A future where power didn't always win. Victor Langston had spent 23 years building an empire of corruption. But empires fell, kings were toppled, and sometimes, just sometimes, the invisible man with nothing to lose changed everything. Ryan looked at his salvage yard, at the house where he'd raised his daughter alone, at the ordinary life he'd fought so hard to protect. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Victor would be released on bail, already plotting his next move. But today, they'd won. And that was enough. The celebration lasted exactly one night. Ryan let Lily stay up late, let her eat ice cream for dinner, let her believe that winning the preliminary hearing meant the fight was over. But when he tucked her in and returned downstairs, the reality of what came next settled over him like a heavy blanket. Chen called at 11 p.m. "Victor posted bail an hour ago, $5 million paid in cash. He's already back at the estate." Ryan stood at his kitchen window, looking out at the salvage yard bathed in moonlight. That was fast. He had it ready, probably anticipated this outcome. Chen paused. "Ryan, you need to be careful. Victor's most dangerous when he's cornered, and right now, with federal agents monitoring his every move, he can't use his usual methods, which means he'll get creative." "Meaning what?" "Meaning watch your back. Keep Lily close. Don't go anywhere alone if you can help it." Chen's voice was grim. "I've seen men like Victor before. They don't accept defeat. They double down." Ryan thought about Marcus, about convenient brake failures and suspicious deaths. "You think he'll try something?" "I think he'll do whatever it takes to avoid prison, whether that means discrediting you, intimidating witnesses, or worse." Chen exhaled slowly. "Just be careful, please." The call ended. Ryan checked all the locks twice, set the security alarm he'd installed after the reporters descended, and tried to sleep. But every sound made him jolt awake. Every car passing on the highway made him reach for his phone. At 3 a.m., he gave up and went downstairs. Made coffee. Sat at the kitchen table with Marcus's letter spread in front of him, reading it again by the dim light over the stove. His brother had known this feeling, this weight of standing against something bigger than yourself, knowing the cost might be everything. Marcus had paid that price. And now Ryan was following the same path, dragging his daughter along with him. The doubt crept in during those dark hours. Maybe he should have taken Victor's deal, sold the property, taken Lily somewhere far away, started over. Let someone else fight this battle. But then he thought about Sophie, growing up believing her father was a criminal. About Isabella, trapped in that mansion for 3 more years until Sophie turned 18. About all the other people Victor would hurt if nobody stopped him. Marcus had chosen to fight. And so would Ryan. Dawn came slowly. Ryan was on his 3rd cup of coffee when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, expecting another reporter, but something made him pick up. Mr. Cole? The voice was female, tentative. This is Sarah Mitchell. I work at the port. Worked, I guess. They fired me yesterday. Ryan's exhaustion sharpened into focus. What can I do for you, Ms. Mitchell? I saw you on the news. What you did, testifying against Victor Langston. A pause. I have information about the shipping operations, things I saw but was too scared to report. But if you're willing to stand up to him, maybe I should too. Ryan sat up straighter. What kind of information? Dates and times of illegal shipments? Photos I took on my phone when I thought something wasn't right? Names of people involved? Her voice wavered. I'm scared, but I'm also tired of being scared. Does that make sense? More than you know. Ryan grabbed a pen. Can you meet me? Somewhere public? They arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown at 9 a.m. Ryan called Chen immediately after, who promised to bring Agent Park. This was exactly what they needed. Another insider willing to testify, someone who could corroborate the documentary evidence with first-hand accounts. When Lily woke up, Ryan tried to act normal, made her favorite breakfast, helped her pick out clothes for school, drove her to the bus stop like everything was fine. But she saw through him the way she always did. You're worried about something, she said as they waited for the bus. Just grown-up stuff. The stuff with Mr. Langston? Ryan looked down at his daughter, 8 years old and already learning that the world wasn't fair, that doing the right thing came with costs, that her father couldn't always protect her from the truth. Yeah, sweetheart, but it's going to be okay. Because you're going to make it okay. It wasn't a question. Lily said it with absolute certainty, the kind of faith children had in their parents before the world taught them otherwise. The bus arrived. Ryan watched Lily climb aboard, her backpack almost as big as she was, waving from the window as the bus pulled away. He stood there long after it disappeared, struck by the responsibility of that faith. His daughter believed he could fix this, and he couldn't let her down. The coffee shop was crowded with the morning rush. Ryan spotted Sarah Mitchell immediately. She was younger than he expected, mid-20s maybe, wearing a port worker's jacket over civilian clothes. Her hands shook as she stirred her coffee. Chen and Agent Park arrived moments later. They took a corner booth, Sarah on one side with Ryan, the lawyer and federal agent, facing them. Park pulled out a recording device with Sarah's permission. Tell us what you know, Park said gently. Sarah took a breath. I've worked at the port for 3 years. Mostly manifest processing and cargo tracking. About 18 months ago, I started noticing inconsistencies. Containers that showed up on arrival logs but not departure logs. Weights that didn't match the cargo descriptions. Timing that was off. Did you report these inconsistencies? Chen asked. To my supervisor. He told me to mind my business, that sometimes paperwork got filed wrong and it wasn't my concern. Sarah pulled out her phone and scrolled through photos. But I couldn't let it go. So I started documenting. Photos of the containers in question, timestamps, everything. She slid the phone across the table. Ryan looked at the screen and felt his stomach drop. Container numbers that matched ones in Marcus's shipping manifests. Timestamps that aligned with the illegal operations his brother had documented. Visual proof to back up paper records. Agent Park was already taking notes. Ms. Mitchell, are you willing to testify to what you've seen? In court? Under oath? Sarah's hands were shaking harder now. If I do that, I'll never work in this industry again. Victor Langston's reach goes beyond this town. He has connections everywhere. We can offer witness protection, Park said. Relocation assistance, job placement, everything you need to start over safely. Start over? Sarah laughed bitterly. I've lived here my whole life. My family is here, my friends, everything. Ryan understood that feeling, the weight of choosing between safety and home. I know what you're risking, and I know it's not fair that you have to risk it, but people like Victor count on us being too scared to fight back. That's how they keep winning. Sarah met his eyes. Your brother fought back, and they killed him. They did, but his evidence is what started this whole investigation. He lost his life, but he didn't lose the war. Ryan leaned forward. You have a chance to finish what Marcus started, to make sure his death meant something. I can't promise it'll be easy, but I can promise it's worth it. The coffee shop noise filled the silence while Sarah considered. Finally, she nodded. Okay, I'll testify, But I need protection, real protection, not just promises. You'll have it, Agent Park assured her. We'll set you up in a safe house today, full security detail until the trial. They spent the next hour going through Sarah's documentation, every photo, every inconsistency, every piece of evidence that supported the federal case. By the time they finished, Park was smiling. This is substantial. Combined with the financial records and the other witnesses, we have a solid case. She stood. Ms. Mitchell, I'm going to arrange your protection now. Mr. Cole, Mr. Chen, thank you. This is exactly what we needed. Sarah left with Agent Park. Ryan and Chen remained at the booth, drinking cold coffee and processing what had just happened. That's 4 witnesses now, Chen said. Plus the documentary evidence, the financial records, everything Marcus gathered. Victor's lawyers can attack your credibility all they want, but they can't dismiss 4 independent witnesses all saying the same thing. They'll try. Of course they will. But we're building a case that's getting harder to deny. Chen pulled out his laptop. Speaking of which, I need to show you something. It arrived this morning. He turned the screen toward Ryan, an email from an address Ryan didn't recognize. The message was brief. I have information about Marcus Cole's death. Not safe to meet in person, but I can provide proof that his car was sabotaged. Will testify if guaranteed protection. Ryan's heart hammered. Who is this? We don't know yet. The email is encrypted, sent through anonymous servers, but Agent Park is working on tracing it. Chen closed the laptop. If this person is legitimate, if they have actual proof of sabotage, that changes everything. It turns Marcus's death from suspicious circumstances into murder, and it ties Victor directly to a capital crime. Ryan sat back, processing. All these years, he'd wondered about the accident. Had Marcus really just been unlucky? Or had Victor made sure he couldn't expose the conspiracy? The possibility of finally knowing the truth made Ryan's chest tight. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You should know what you're risking. Check your email. Ryan pulled out his phone and opened his email app. A new message waited, sent from a burner address. No text, just a video attachment. Ryan's hands went cold. He glanced at Chen, who nodded grimly. The video was taken from someone's phone, shaky footage of the salvage yard at night. Ryan recognized the angle, the view from the road looking down at his property. As he watched, a figure in dark clothes approached the yard's fence. They didn't try to break in, just stood there for a moment, then placed something on the ground before walking away. The video ended. Ryan's mouth was dry. What did they leave? Only one way to find out. Chen stood. But we're calling the police first, and not local police, federal agents. 20 minutes later, Ryan stood outside his own property while FBI agents in tactical gear swept the area. They found the package quickly, right where the video showed it being placed. A shoebox wrapped in brown paper. The bomb squad was called. Ryan watched from behind a police barricade as they used a robot to examine the package. His mind raced with terrible possibilities. What if Lily had found it? What if Mrs. Chen had picked it up? After an hour of tense waiting, the all-clear was given. Not a bomb, just a message. The box contained photographs, Ryan caught on camera at various locations around town. The bank, the courthouse, the coffee shop that morning with Sarah Mitchell, and most chillingly, photos of Lily. At school, at the bus stop, playing in the salvage yard. A note was tucked among the photos, typed on plain paper. Accidents happen every day. Brake failures, house fires. Children wander into traffic. It would be tragic if something happened because their father couldn't let go of conspiracy theories. Ryan's vision narrowed to a pinpoint. Chen grabbed his arm, holding him back from doing something stupid like storming Victor's estate and finishing this with his bare hands. This is witness intimidation, Agent Park said, bagging the evidence. We can add it to the charges against Langston. You think he's stupid enough to have done this himself? Ryan's voice was ragged. He'll have someone else's fingerprints on that box. Someone who'll testify Victor had nothing to do with it. Probably. But we can still use it to show pattern of behavior, and it proves you and your daughter need protection. Park pulled out her phone. I'm arranging a safe house for you both, today. No. Ryan's response was immediate. Mr. Cole, they just threatened your daughter. And if we run, Victor wins. He scares us off, gets us out of the way, and continues attacking the other witnesses until nobody's willing to testify. Ryan forced his breathing to steady. We're staying, but I want security. Real security. Federal marshals, cameras, whatever it takes. Park looked like she wanted to argue, but Chen spoke up. He's right. Running sets a precedent. Every other witness will think if Ryan Cole had to hide, they should too. We need to show that we're not backing down. Fine, Park said finally, but you're getting a full security detail, and Lily doesn't go anywhere without protection. The rest of the day was a blur of security arrangements. Federal marshals arrived to set up a rotation. Cameras were installed around the property. Lily's school was notified and security protocols put in place. When Lily came home on the bus, she found two serious-looking agents in suits standing in her living room. Dad? Her voice was small. What's happening? Ryan knelt down to her level. Remember how I said the grown-up stuff was complicated? Well, it got a little more complicated. These people are going to stay with us for a while, just to make sure we're safe. Safe from what? How did you explain to an 8-year-old that her father had made enemies of dangerous men? That choosing to fight meant putting her in the crosshairs too? From people who don't like that we're telling the truth, Ryan said carefully, but these agents are really good at their jobs, and we're going to be fine, okay? Lily looked at the marshals, at the cameras being installed, at her father's too bright smile. She wasn't stupid. She knew something was wrong. Okay, she said quietly. But I don't like this. I know, monster, neither do I. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. He lay in bed listening to the house settle, hyper-aware of every sound. The marshals rotated shifts outside. Cameras recorded every approach to the property. They were as safe as they could be. But safe wasn't the same as unthreatened. Victor had made his message clear. Back off, or people get hurt. At 2 a.m., Ryan gave up on sleep and went downstairs. One of the marshals, a woman named Torres, was at the kitchen table reviewing security footage. Can't sleep? She asked. Too much coffee, too much adrenaline. Take your pick. Ryan poured himself water. How often does this work? Intimidation tactics like today? Depends on the target. Some people fold immediately, others dig in harder. Torres studied him. Which one are you? Ryan thought about Marcus's letter, about Lily upstairs sleeping under federal protection because her father had chosen to fight, about all the people counting on him to see this through. I don't know yet, he admitted. Ask me again when this is over. The next morning brought news. The anonymous emailer had made contact again, this time providing specific details about Marcus's car. The mechanic who'd done the pre-death inspection was willing to testify that the brake line showed signs of deliberate cutting, not wear and tear. Victor's people had paid him to keep quiet 3 years ago. Now, he was ready to talk. 2 days later, another witness came forward, a dock worker who'd seen Victor personally overseeing one of the illegal shipments. Then another, and another. The dam had broken. People who'd been too scared to speak up for years suddenly found courage in numbers. Victor's legal team went into overdrive. They filed motions to exclude evidence, to dismiss witnesses, to delay the trial. They launched a media campaign painting Ryan as the leader of a conspiracy to frame an innocent man. They dug into every aspect of Ryan's life, looking for ammunition, and they found some. Ryan's financial troubles were made public. His struggles after his wife's death, his brother's unpaid loan. Everything was twisted to support the narrative that Ryan was desperate and unstable. But for every attack, there was another witness stepping forward. Another piece of evidence that couldn't be explained away. The case against Victor grew stronger daily. 3 weeks before the trial, Isabella called. It was the first time Ryan had heard from her since the preliminary hearing. I saw the photos, she said without preamble. The ones they left at your house. I'm so sorry. This is my fault. It's Victor's fault, not yours. I should never have dragged you into this. You and Lily could have been safe if you'd just what? Let Victor win? Let Sophie grow up thinking her father was a criminal? Ryan cut her off. You did the right thing. We all did. Isabella was crying. Ryan could hear it in her voice even though she tried to hide it. Sophie asks about you, about when we can visit. She doesn't understand why we're in a safe house instead of home. Tell her soon. Tell her we're fighting for something important, and when it's done, things will be better. Will they? Or are we just creating different problems? Ryan didn't have an answer for that. The trial would destroy Victor's empire, yes, but it would also leave a power vacuum. Other people who'd benefited from the corruption would scramble to protect themselves. The town would fracture along new lines, and Ryan's life would never be quiet again. I don't know, he said honestly, but it has to be better than living under Victor's control. It has to be. They talked for a while longer, mostly about nothing. How Sophie was doing in her temporary school, how Isabella was coping with the isolation. Small talk that felt important because it was normal, human, a reminder that this wasn't just about legal battles and federal investigations. When the call ended, Ryan felt both better and worse. Better because Isabella and Sophie were safe, worse because he could hear the toll this was taking on them. The weeks crawled by. Ryan maintained the salvage yard with help from neighbors who'd rallied to his side. Lily adjusted to having federal marshals as constant companions. The media circus continued, though its intensity fluctuated based on what new development broke that day. 1 week before trial, Victor made an offer. His lawyers contacted Chen with a proposal. Victor would plead guilty to reduce charges in exchange for Ryan signing an affidavit stating he'd fabricated some of the evidence. Victor would serve 5 years instead of life. Ryan would avoid perjury charges for his exaggerations. Chen presented the offer in his office, his expression neutral. It's not the worst deal. Victor still goes to prison. You avoid legal jeopardy, and the trial circus ends. But he gets to claim I lied, that Marcus's evidence was partly fabricated, that there's some truth to his conspiracy theory defense. Yes. Ryan stood and walked to the window. Outside, normal people went about normal days, working, shopping, living lives uninterrupted by federal investigations and murder conspiracies. What happens to the other witnesses if I take this deal? Ryan asked. They'd likely be dropped from the case if Victor pleads to lesser charges. No need for their testimony. So they came forward for nothing, put themselves at risk for nothing. Chen said nothing. The silence was answer enough. Ryan turned from the window. Tell Victor's lawyers no, we're going to trial, and we're going to win. You're sure? Marcus didn't die so Victor could serve 5 years and walk away claiming innocence. This ends properly or not at all. Chen nodded slowly. I'll inform them. The trial began on a Monday morning in early November. The courthouse had to use the largest courtroom available and still couldn't fit everyone who wanted to attend. Media from 3 states packed the gallery. Sketch artists positioned themselves for the best angles. The judge had to threaten contempt charges twice before the crowd settled. Ryan sat at the prosecution table between Chen and Attorney Reeves. Across the aisle, Victor and his 5 lawyers looked confident, ready for battle. Jury selection took 2 days. Both sides fought over every potential juror, looking for bias, sympathies, any edge. Finally, 12 people were seated. Regular citizens who would decide whether a man who'd ruled the town for 2 decades would spend the rest of his life in prison. The prosecution's opening statement laid out the case methodically. 23 years of illegal operations, millions in bribes, multiple deaths connected to people who threatened Victor's empire, a conspiracy so deep it had corrupted entire institutions. Victor's lead attorney, Blackwell, painted a different picture. A successful businessman targeted by a grief-stricken brother who couldn't accept tragedy. Fabricated evidence, coached witnesses, a federal investigation built on lies and desperation. He made it sound almost believable. Then came the witnesses. One by one, they took the stand and told their stories. Sarah Mitchell described the shipping irregularities. The dock worker testified about seeing Victor personally oversee all the illegal cargo transfers. The mechanic explained the signs of sabotage on Marcus's car. Each time, Blackwell attacked their credibility, found inconsistencies in their stories, suggested they'd been paid or coerced, made the jury doubt what they'd heard. But there were too many witnesses, too many independent accounts that aligned, too much documentation that couldn't all be fabricated. Ryan testified on day 6. Reeves walked him through everything again. The velvet box, Marcus's letter, the deposit box contents. Ryan spoke clearly, calmly, refusing to let Blackwell rattle him during cross-examination. When asked why he'd pursued this case despite threats and intimidation, Ryan looked directly at the jury. Because my daughter is watching. Because Sophie deserves to know her father was a hero, not a criminal. Because if we don't stand up to people like Victor Langston, they win, and they keep winning, and eventually there's nobody left willing to fight. The courtroom was silent. Even Blackwell seemed momentarily at a loss for his next attack. On day 9, Isabella testified. She'd fought against it, but ultimately agreed when Agent Park explained how crucial her testimony was. She walked through her marriage to Victor, the control he exerted, the threats he'd made. She confirmed that Marcus had been investigating the illegal operations, that Victor had known about it, that the timing of Marcus's death was too convenient to be accidental. Blackwell tried to paint her as a scorned wife seeking revenge, but Isabella's quiet dignity, her obvious pain, made her compelling. When she described being forced to choose between her freedom and Sophie's safety, several jurors were visibly moved. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Both sides presented mountains of evidence, dozens of witnesses, expert testimony about shipping regulations and financial fraud and automotive sabotage. Finally, closing arguments. Reeves tied everything together, showing how each piece of evidence supported the others, how the pattern was undeniable. Victor Langston had built an empire on corruption and violence, and he'd killed anyone who threatened to expose it. Blackwell's closing was equally powerful. He poked holes, created doubt, reminded the jury that correlation wasn't causation, that circumstantial evidence wasn't proof, that destroying a man's life required absolute certainty, not just probability. The jury got the case on a Friday afternoon. Ryan went home to wait, Marshall still at his side, Lily asking questions he couldn't answer. Would they win? Would Victor go to prison? What happened next? Saturday passed in agonizing slowness. Sunday, too. The jury deliberated through the weekend, sent out questions for clarification, requested evidence to review again. Monday morning, the call came. Verdict reached. Report to courthouse immediately. The courtroom was even more packed than before. Ryan sat between Chen and Reeves, hands clenched in his lap. Across the aisle, Victor sat motionless, his expression giving nothing away. The jury filed in. Ryan tried to read their faces but couldn't. They looked tired, serious, ready to be done with this. The judge asked if they'd reached a verdict. The foreperson, a middle-aged woman who'd been an accountant, stood. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of racketeering, how do you find? Guilty. The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order. Ryan felt like he couldn't breathe. On the charge of money laundering, how do you find? Guilty. Victor's expression cracked. Just slightly, but Ryan saw it. The first hint of fear. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Marcus Cole, how do you find? The foreperson looked directly at Victor. Guilty. The sound in the courtroom was deafening. Reporters rushing for exits, spectators reacting in shock or triumph, Victor's lawyers huddling urgently, and Ryan sitting frozen, trying to process that it was over. They'd won. Marcus's death was ruled a murder. Victor was guilty. Justice, imperfect and delayed, had finally arrived. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge gave Victor life in prison without possibility of parole. The courtroom showed no mercy to a man who'd shown none to others. As Victor was led away in shackles, he looked at Ryan one final time. Not with hatred or threats, just empty acceptance. The king had fallen, and he knew there was no coming back. Outside the courthouse, media surrounded Ryan, but he ignored their questions, pushing through to where Mrs. Chen waited with Lily. His daughter ran to him and Ryan caught her, holding her tight while cameras flashed around them. Is it over? Lily asked. Yeah, monster. It's over. That night, Ryan sat in his kitchen with the people who'd helped him win. Chen, Agent Park, Mrs. Chen, a few neighbors who'd stood by him when others hadn't. They shared a simple dinner, no champagne or celebration, just quiet satisfaction that they'd done something that mattered. Isabella called later. She and Sophie were preparing to leave the safe house, to return to some semblance of normal life. What will you do now? Ryan asked. Stay, I think. This is still my home, Sophie's home. We're not going to let Victor chase us away anymore. She paused. The Port Authority offered me a job, helping clean up the corruption, implementing new oversight procedures. I said yes. That's good. That's really good. And Ryan? Thank you for everything. for finishing what Marcus started, for giving Sophie a truth she can be proud of. He was my brother. It's what family does. After the call, Ryan went outside. The salvage yard was quiet under the stars. The federal marshals had left that afternoon, their job done. The cameras would come down tomorrow. Life would slowly return to normal, whatever that meant now. Lily found him there, wrapped in a blanket against the November cold. "Dad? Are you okay?" Ryan pulled her close. "Yeah, sweetheart. I'm okay." "Do you think Uncle Marcus knows that you won?" Ryan looked up at the stars, countless points of light in the darkness. "I hope so. I really hope so." They stood together in comfortable silence, father and daughter, survivors of a war neither had chosen, but both had fought. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The salvage yard needed work. Lily's education needed attention. There were bills to pay and damage to repair and a future to build. But tonight, they had this: peace, safety. The knowledge that standing up to monsters was possible. Difficult, costly, terrifying, but possible. 3 months later, Ryan stood at the port watching Isabella address a crowd gathered for the cleanup initiative's launch. She spoke confidently about transparency and accountability, about building systems that couldn't be corrupted by any one person. Sophie stood beside Ryan holding his hand. She was growing so fast, looking more like Marcus every day. She'd started asking questions about her father, real questions, and Ryan told her the truth. That Marcus had been brave, that he'd fought for what was right, that his death meant something because people had refused to let it be in vain. The salvage yard was thriving again. Turned out that people liked doing business with someone who'd taken down a corrupt empire. Ryan had more work than he could handle, had even hired 2 employees to help manage the load. Lily was back to being a normal kid. Well, as normal as you could be after living through a federal investigation. But she laughed more now, worried less, still wanted to take over the family business someday. As Isabella finished her speech to applause, Ryan felt someone approach from behind. He turned to find Chen, looking remarkably relaxed for a lawyer who'd just spent months on the most intense case of his career. "Thought I might find you here," Chen said. "Wouldn't miss it. Isabella's worked hard for this." "So have you." Chen handed Ryan an envelope. "Final payment for my services. As discussed, I'm not taking a fee. Consider it pro bono work in the service of justice." Ryan tried to push the envelope back. "James, you worked for months. I can't." "Yes, you can. Because some cases aren't about money. They're about making sure the good guys win occasionally." Chen smiled. "Besides, I've already gotten 3 new clients from the publicity. I'm fine." They watched Isabella work the crowd, confident and determined. A woman who'd been trapped finding freedom. A widow making sure her husband's death created positive change. "Do you think it'll last?" Ryan asked. "The reforms, the changes? Or will someone else just fill Victor's shoes?" "Maybe. Probably, even. Power vacuums have a way of getting filled." Chen considered. "But the people filling them will know what happened to Victor Langston. They'll know that corruption has consequences, that ordinary people can fight back and win. That's worth something." Ryan nodded slowly. It had to be worth something. All the fear, the threats, the months of his daughter living under federal protection, Marcus's death, Isabella's suffering, 3 years of pain and anger and grief. It had to mean something. Sophie tugged on his hand. "Uncle Ryan, can we get ice cream after this?" Ryan smiled down at her. "Absolutely. What flavor?" "Chocolate. Always chocolate." "Just like your dad." They walked towards the ice cream shop, Sophie chattering about school and friends and normal 8-year-old concerns. Chen fell into step beside them, and Mrs. Chen appeared from somewhere with Lily in tow. An unlikely family, bound together by tragedy and triumph. People who'd chosen to stand when it would have been easier to run, who'd fought when fighting seemed impossible. At the ice cream shop, Ryan bought cones for everyone. They sat outside despite the cold, Lily and Sophie comparing flavors, Chen and Mrs. Chen debating local politics. Normal conversation, normal moments. This was what Ryan had fought for. Not revenge or justice or victory over enemies, just this. The simple right to live without fear. To raise children who believed doing the right thing mattered. To build a future worth protecting. Marcus would have liked this, Ryan thought, would have appreciated the ordinariness of it. The victory that wasn't dramatic or theatrical, just peaceful and real. As the sun set over the harbor, painting everything in shades of gold and amber, Ryan felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Not happiness exactly, not closure, but maybe the beginning of healing. The fight was over. The monster was caged, and Ryan Cole, single father and salvage yard owner, had discovered something important about himself. He was stronger than he'd known, braver than he'd believed, capable of standing against impossible odds and winning. Lily leaned against his shoulder, ice cream melting down her fingers. "Dad? I'm proud of you." Ryan's throat tightened. "Yeah, monster?" "Yeah. You did something really hard and really scary, but you did it anyway. That's what heroes do." Ryan looked at his daughter, at her Marcus brown eyes filled with admiration and love, at Sophie beside her, 2 little girls who would grow up knowing their fathers had been heroes, at the community gathered around them, stronger for having survived this trial together. "I'm not a hero, sweetheart. I'm just a dad who wanted to protect his family." "That's what makes you a hero," Lily said simply. Maybe she was right. Maybe heroism wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic victories. Maybe it was just about showing up every day, doing the hard thing when it needed doing, standing firm when everything inside you wanted to run. Ryan had spent 3 years angry at his brother for dying. Now he understood. Marcus hadn't abandoned them. He'd given them a gift, the evidence to fight back, the courage to stand up, the example of what it meant to choose principle over safety. And Ryan had honored that gift, had finished what Marcus started, had made sure his brother's sacrifice meant something real and lasting. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but theirs. The salvage yard would keep running, Lily would keep growing. The town would heal, slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. And Ryan would be there through all of it, building the life his brother had died protecting. Not a fairy tale ending. Real life didn't work that way. There would be challenges ahead, setbacks, moments of doubt. Victor's empire had fallen, but the damage would take years to fully repair. But they had time now. They had freedom. They had each other. And in the end, that was enough. Ryan finished his ice cream and stood, ready to head home. Home, his daughter, his life. Simple things that Victor Langston had tried to take and failed. The Invisible Man had won after all, not through power or money or influence, but through stubbornness and truth, and the refusal to accept that monsters always won. Sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys won too. And that was a lesson worth teaching his daughter, worth fighting for, worth everything it had cost. Ryan took Lily's hand and walked toward the truck, the setting sun warm on his back, the future stretching bright ahead. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they had this: peace, safety, home. And that was more than enough. That was everything.